Good evening. I'm going to call the regular committee of the whole meeting for July 14th, 2025 to order at 6 p.m. My name is Councillor Garnett. I'll be chairing the meeting, and with me, committee members in the chambers. To my far left, Councillor Novak, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Rintoul. To my far right, Councillor Duck, Councillor Duncan, and Mayor McNeil-Smith. And also good evening to staff that are in attendance in the chambers, to those who are watching the live broadcast, and to those who will watch at a later time when it's posted to the town's website. And a special thank you to those from the public who have joined us in the chambers tonight and wanting to spend your night with us as opposed to doing other things, so appreciate it. Thank you. I'll begin by respectfully acknowledging that we're holding this meeting on the traditional territory of the Wasayanich Nations, and that's the Sartlip, the Sayout, the Sakum, the Paquachin, and the Malahat, and express gratitude and appreciation for their stewardship of these lands and waters for millennia. Next, move to approval of the agenda, and there are some changes. First off, I will bring that late items have come in under email correspondence, and one's for item 8B, and it's from a Mr. Jamie Welburn. And then under items 8C and 8D, Mr. Jamie Welburn has also sent an email in there as well, and it's pertains to both, so we'll put it under the same heading. And also we will be moving one item. So under presentation 6B, develop an amenity cost charges, will be moved and will now become 8A1, and proposed development and amenity cost charge rate from the staff perspective will become 8A2. So I'll look for someone to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Duck. Seconded by Councillor Novak. Are there any other additions or changes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up, we have public participation. So at the regular committee of the whole meetings, generally what happens is you can speak to items that are actually on the agenda for this meeting. Under 7A and 7B, these are two development applications, and in there, built in, is a public participation portion for people. So respectfully, if you'd like to speak to either of those two items, it'd be great if you could just wait until those come up later on the agenda. But anything else you want to speak to on the agenda is available for people to speak to and address council. If you approach the mic stand, you push a button on the bottom of the stand, and the little red light will light up around the top. And you'll have approximately 4 minutes. At that point, if you could just give your name and the municipality within which you reside, that'd be greatly appreciated. So for our first time, I'll seek if anybody would like to address council from the public. And I'll ask for a second time. And a third time. We were to have a public participation by Zoom, but I don't see that the person has joined us, so we'll move on to the next item.
Oh, sorry, was that supposed to be me, Kimberly Wade, for the variance?
No, I'll come to you under item 7. This was just for regular public.
That's what I thought.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry.
Yeah, nope, it's all right. Next up, we'll look for approval of the minutes from the regular committee of the whole meeting from May 20th, 2025. Moved by Mayor McNeil-Smith, seconded by Councillor Duck. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Next up, we have presentations, and under presentations, we have a presentation from the Beacon Community Centers and SHOAL Center, and we have Director Jennifer Van Ness with us. She should come forward and provide a presentation to the committee. The floor is yours.
Okay. Nope.
If anybody's watching at home, we're just waiting on some technical difficulties.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council of Sydney. My name is Jennifer Van Ness. I'm Director of Senior Services for Beacon Community Services. Thank you for having us. We're excited to share with you a bit about Beacon and what we do at the SHOAL Center. Beacon Community Services respectfully acknowledges that we live, work, and serve on the traditional and unceded territories of many Indigenous nations, including the Wasanich and the Wasanich people and the Algonquin-speaking peoples of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. Beacon Community Services' long-standing commitment to those we serve, including our staff and volunteers, is to work in partnership with Indigenous peoples and cultures to better understand how we can strengthen relationships and move together with care, love, and respect. This presentation is just a presentation a little bit about Beacon, about what we do as an organization, and about what we do here in Sydney. I'm going to present about SHOAL Centre and what we're doing at SHOAL Centre. And I'm going to present some IT and infrastructure upgrades that we are presenting to you, and some initiatives that we are working on at SHOAL Centre. And we're looking at this as a strategic investment for Beacon Community Services and the town of Sydney. And then I'll talk about some of our next steps. Beacon Community Services is a not-for-profit located in the CRD with wraparound services from birth to end to life. We have over 250 staff and 570 volunteers supporting our services. Our services include child and family, so that's parenting programs and playgroups, food security support, early years and strong start centers, licensed childcare, childcare resource and referral services, child and youth complex behavior support, so that includes FASD support, and youth support and counseling. We operate 7 thrift shops, and we offer free items for clients and job seekers. We have volunteer skill building and free cashier training in our store downtown on Pandora Street. Last year, over 644,000 items were sold through our thrift shops. Our employment services has job training and support, with our newest program being called BEAMS, which is a program for those facing mental health, housing, or substance use challenges. And since its launch in September of 2024, we have supported 96 people and connected with over 170 people. Our homelessness prevention services include our Out of the Rain Youth Shelter, which is a year-round shelter for Safe Shelter, which provides meals for young people living on the streets in Victoria. We offer a dinner, a place to sleep, and a breakfast in the morning. We have rental supplements and homeless prevention support. 95 clients received rental subsidy from us last year. And we operate the Mere Supportive Housing Unit, which has 48 suites for young adults aged 19 to 27, and we provide meals, shelter, harm reduction, and group programs. And we operate subsidized housing for people with disability and seniors. SHOAL Centre and Senior Services, which you are familiar with, has programs and services for adults 55 plus to support independence, decrease social isolation, and improve well-being. And we operate 2 assisted living facilities, SHOAL Centre and Perry Place in Victoria. Our volunteer services boast 570 volunteers supporting Beacon's programs, with over 114,000 volunteer hours last year, which is the equivalent to over 58 full-time positions. In Sydney, Beacon has many services. We have our family support services and employment services with counseling. We offer the Strong Start, Best Babies, and Mother Goose programs. And our employment services has helped 109 clients find employment last year. We have 3 thrift shops in Sydney with over 100 volunteers, and our volunteer services reside in Sydney as well, with 46% of our volunteers from Beacon residing in Sydney as well, including one of our longest standing volunteers who's been a volunteer for over 30 years. SHOAL Centre is a warm and welcoming place where seniors can be engaged in community and find supports and services to enhance their lives. SHOAL has 813 members that reside in the town of Sydney. About 80% of the membership are from Sydney. Along with vibrant fitness and an activity schedule, we have bereavement, depression, and mental health and caregiver support groups that meet weekly. Our outreach programs help seniors manage day-to-day tasks, enabling them to stay at home while staying closely connected to their communities. Volunteers are our eyes and ears in the community, and they let us know when a client needs more support. We have over 225 Beacon volunteers working in SHOAL Center and delivering programs here on the peninsula. Our volunteer income tax preparers have completed over 1,500 tax returns so far this year. And last year, we delivered over 12,000 meals to isolated seniors. Our volunteer medical drivers covered enough kilometers to circle the globe 2.7 times last year. SHOAL Center's vision is to create a future-orientated, welcoming gathering space that will remain relevant and engaging for years to come. We aim to provide services that enhance quality of life, foster meaningful social connections, and respond to the evolving needs of seniors. As our population ages and becomes more diverse, the health and social needs of seniors are becoming more fluid and complex. Senior centers play an important part in providing health promotion programs, social services, and recreational activities that enhance the health and well-being of seniors while decreasing social isolation. According to the National Institute on Aging, the health risks of prolonged isolation are equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Social isolation and loneliness have been estimated to shorten a person's lifespan by as much as 15 years. We are planning for the future and want to create a welcoming space where seniors can find social connection and support while addressing accessibility barriers. We have considered the following key elements based on successful models and expert insights: the use of multi-purpose rooms with flexible design, accessibility and age-friendly features, technology integration, social and community building, and a comfortable and welcoming environment. Our dining room is outdated and it feels very institutionalized. We present the transformation of this former dining room into a community cafe. This is not just about reimagining a space, it's about creating a gathering space where seniors belong and are able to increase social interactions, reducing isolation. We know that seniors may find themselves disconnected from the daily rhythms of community life. Loneliness grows, often invisibly, but its effects are deeply felt. One of the most powerful antidotes is also the most timeless: gathering around food. We want to create this space for our community. Beacon is committed to support the growing population of seniors who are seeking opportunities for social engagement and access to a modernized, health-focused center. The space would be versatile, used for a variety of events, and used for seniors and other members of the community. As you can see here, it has the versatility to be changed into being a multi-use space. Our menu for the cafe will be geared towards a health-focused fare, and the cafe will have comfortable, movable seating. We believe that the small changes to the dining room will have a large impact on the seniors coming to SHOAL and decrease social isolation. Along with creating a vibrant community gathering space, we have identified that an IT upgrade is needed to support the needs of the community and the center. The SHOAL Center serves as a hub for community engagement. However, the current technical infrastructure limits the ability of SHOAL Center users to meet the growing demands of the services they require, while keeping them safe and future-proofing technological needs. Along with the Gathering Place revision, this IT infrastructure upgrade is a strategic investment in the SHOAL Center's future and aligns with the Town of Sydney's mission, ensuring it remains a vital resource for seniors and the broader community for current and future generations. The IT infrastructure upgrade will enhance community services and increase accessibility for seniors, community engagement, and the value of SHOAL. Improved connectivity will enable the center to reliably host online and hybrid events, reaching more residents and meeting the needs of seniors where they are. New and forward-thinking services attract more seniors, increasing foot traffic to nearby businesses as well. Future initiatives such as local business partnerships and hosting community events further bolster economic activity, thus having a positive impact on Sydney. For our next steps, we are going to seek member feedback to identify future needs of the SHOAL Centre. We're going to continue working on a design for an accessible and modern gathering place where seniors are welcome and it supports their growing needs. We're going to identify future-focused strategy for SHOAL, IT, with enhanced accessibility and readiness for future demands. And we're going to continue to source funding for both projects. We have already invested in this project with over $70,000 in grant funding. We're here to obtain council support for this project, and we'll be able to provide more information and costs involved as we continue to work on these initiatives. Thank you very much. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Van Ness. And I'll now go to committee members if you have any comments or questions of the presenter. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and reminding us of all the great things SHOAL is doing. I know so many seniors in the community that, you know, they're going there to play chess, to play ping pong, for the music groups, to get their tax returns done. So it really is a really important hub. So thanks for all that good work that you do. In regards, one thing I think I remember hearing not too long ago is having a new seniors housing navigator at SHOAL. And is that still happening? And I'm just curious in what sorts of things they might be engaged in.
Yeah, we have a seniors housing navigator. It's a part-time position. She works 3 days a week, and she supports seniors who are they could be facing homelessness. They may just need help with filling out paperwork for BC Housing or different government forms that they need to find rental supplements for. She has helped people find housing. She's been with us for almost 3 years now and has supported probably close to 200 seniors with housing insecurity issues. So yes, she's there. We also have an advocate. We call it an advocate, but it's more a navigator position. It's a volunteer position, and she will do some of the same things where seniors can come to SHOAL and just meet with her, and she'll help guide them through the internet, filling out forms, and quite often that has to do with housing as well.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
thanks. And also, if I may, you mentioned seeking council's support. Were you looking for something specific from us tonight, or just bringing this kind of to our attention, and you would come forward at some future point in terms of a specific sort of request in terms of support?
Yeah, right now we're seeking for council support. We just want you to know the initiatives and what we've been working on, and the opportunity in the future to come forward with an ask of financial support or other support if needed.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other members? Seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Van Ness, for your presentation, and thanks to you, the rest of your staff, and your volunteers for all the excellent community services you provide for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just waiting a second while we have the screen cleared. Great, thank you. So next on the agenda is item 7A, and this is Development Variance Permit Application Number DV 100375 at 2090 Rennie Place. This is to relax the accessory building setback requirement from 1.2 meters to 0.4 meters in order to allow for the construction of a shed on the subject property. And we have on Zoom Kimberly Wade as the applicant presenting, and the floor is yours.
Okay, hello, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for having me tonight. Yes, my name is Kimberly, and I'm the owner of 2090 Rennie Place. I am requesting the variance to the setback bylaw that requires the accessory buildings to be located no less than 1.2 meters from any lot line. I am proposing to place a new storage shed in the back left corner of my property. Due to the irregular shape of my lot, particularly in that rear corner, I am requesting a variance to allow for the setback to range from, I have it in feet. It's 1 foot 4 inches to 2 feet 11 inches from the lot line. This location ensures optimal placement and alignment with the house, allowing the shed to sit square to the house as shown in the site map. I'm hoping that you were all provided that so you can kind of have an idea. Yeah, okay, great. The left side of the lot has the double gate and the gravel access running along the side of the house to the proposed shed, making this the most logical and practical placement. The shed would also sit onto our neighbor's shed directly behind us. So where our shed is, at the back of their property is also their shed. The right side of our lot, the opposite side, has a large shed that I wish to preserve, along with the only grassy area for my children and dog. If I were to move the shed to meet the 1.2 meter requirement, I would need to move some of my vegetable garden and the grass between the shed and the house. It would place the shed too close to the house and deck and limiting access, affecting the usability and appearance of that space. This shed will allow me to clean up my front and backyard and move my RV further back in my front yard, which will create more parking space. This is very important. I don't know if anybody has been on the Rennie cul-de-sac, but we have a very significant issue with street parking here. So this would help to alleviate some of that congestion. I have done a great deal of work improving this property since purchasing it in 2019, and the storage shed would be essential for storing tools, equipment, seasonal items in a secure and organized way. It will also allow me to consolidate 3 sheds that we already have, helping to declutter the yard and improve the overall aesthetic of the property. I plan to finish the shed with the siding and paint it to match the house, ensuring it blends with the property and the neighborhood. I promise to keep it well maintained, and it will have minimal to no negative impact on the adjacent properties. This shed will enhance the functionality and appearance of my lot. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. And so in the normal protocol of this part of the meeting, the next I open it up to public participation. And after that, staff will weigh in, and then it'll be open to questions to you from committee members or questions of staff. So next up, I will open up public participation for this item to the public in the audience for a first time. And a second time, and a third time. So I'll close that, and I'll go to staff for comment. Ms. Verhagen?
Good evening, thank you. Yeah, as the applicant indicated, this application is to relax the minimum permitted setbacks for an accessory building in the rear yard of this property. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, and at staff, we have no concerns with the requested variance. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Look to committee members. Anybody have any questions of either the applicant or staff? Okay, I actually do. So, Ms. Wade, a couple questions for you. And I have been by the property a couple times on the weekends, and I can understand what you're saying about parking. It was a bit of a challenge getting around the corner. The shed indicates on the paperwork that it's 20 by 12, but there's no indication of the height. Do you happen to know how high?
Yeah, the proposed height is 13 feet 8 inches, so just under 14 feet.
Okay, and I'm assuming that you're going to use the extra for storage above to give you more flexibility?
Yeah, the idea is to have like a bit of a lofted space on either side, kind of as you walk in.
Okay.
So you can kind of a ladder.
And the last question, having been by the property, is this, and maybe staff can weigh in as well, is this a retroactive request? Just that I noticed that there seems to already be construction that has happened. So is there a reason why this is coming forward? Like, did town staff notice it? Was there a neighbor that had concerns?
Do you want me to answer?
Sure, if you can, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yes, we already did start the construction. There was a smaller shed there before, and so we had just tore it down and did start. I don't know of anyone having any concerns. We have great relationships with all of our neighbors, so I'm not sure. But we did have, oh, I have just lost his name right now. A fellow from the town council, or from the town, pardon me, who has just moved on to Saanich. He had come by and taken a look at it and just asked me to get in touch with the town and do the variance request, but did seem to give me a thumbs up on everything else in the structure and how it was looking so far. So nothing more has been done.
Great. Yeah, no, I was just wondering what caused the variance request when it was, but you've answered the question, so that's great. So that's all the questions I have. So if somebody would like to move the motion, Councillor Duck.
Yeah, I'm prepared to make the recommendation and move that owners and tenants and occupation of the property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 2090 Rennie Place be notified regarding development variance application number DV 100375 to relax the setback requirement for an accessory building from 1.2 meters to 0.4 meters in order to allow for the construction of a shed on the subject property, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of the approval of the variance.
Motive? Wish to motivate? Seconder? Wish to motivate? No? Anybody else? Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm just going to follow up on your question then about the height. I'm trying to picture 14 feet. It feels like that's taller than a standard shed, and I'm just wondering if that's the kind of thing that should go in information, or if that's within what would be standard for an accessory building.
Ms. Verhagen?
Yeah, thank you. Through to Councillor Duncan, the zoning bylaw allows a maximum height of 5 meters for accessory buildings, which is around 16 feet. So
Okay.
what's being proposed by the applicant is shorter than is the maximum permitted.
Perfect, thank you.
Anybody else? I'll just make a comment. Just the motion is to have a mail out go out, and given that it's the summer and people may not be home, past experience, I think it's in your best interest if you were to reach out to the people that might be most impacted by it, and thinking of 2086 Rennie and 9496 and 9490 Eastbrook. Maybe reach out as a neighbor and just maybe get them to send in an email or a letter, or even get them to do something for it. Just makes it easier for us and for staff when we know that the neighbors most directly affected are supportive of it.
Okay, sounds good. I will reach out to them.
Great, thank you. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next on the agenda, we're going to item 7B, and this is development permit application number 100847 and development variance permit application number 100359. And this is for 2114 Beacon Avenue West, 209 Avenue Beacon Avenue West, and 2107 John Place. This is to relax the minimum front yard setback for the proposed buildings and for the form and character of a 180-unit, 4-story residential development. And we have with us, I think Romy Rita is online from Nick, the architect's office. We have present with us Cody Yadresko and Scott Davies as presenters, and we also, I believe, had Nick Salvador here, who's a designer who can answer questions. So at this point in time, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Good evening. So everybody's probably familiar with this proposal. Last time we were here in November, and we listened to everything that was said in regards to the proposal. And we've come back now with hopefully something that's more palatable for Sydney. So I will start by, the building has grown. We have acquired 2 additional lots to the west, so we could make the parking work and add some more units at the same time. So this is the location map. I think everybody knows where that is. Here's a superimposed shot of the lot showing the 2 new lots that were acquired. So the proposal is for 180 units, 124 1-bedrooms, 38 2-bedrooms, and 18 3-bedrooms. We've got 36 adaptable units, lot coverage at almost 60%, building height of 15.25 meters, proposed FAR is 2.04. Total parking stalls now is 183 parking stalls for 180 units, so that's over the required 1.1 per unit. We've also got 205 bike stalls, 12 Class 2 bike stalls, or bike parking stalls, and 8 cargo bikes. It's important to note that all this does comply with the newly adopted OCP policies, and I'm sure everybody's aware of those. I don't think I need to go through those at this point. It also complies with the West Side Local Area Plan policy. It also complies with all the zoning that was recently adopted last June, I think it was, apart from the small variance that we're asking for the front yard setbacks of the two buildings. This is just a site plan. It's somewhat similar to what we had proposed before. 2 buildings, one fronting Beacon, one fronting John Place. There's a courtyard in between the buildings and a sort of a podium area that with parking underneath it. I think there's, is there 36 stalls underneath that? 34 stalls under the podium area, and then you go down the stairs and there'd be gardens throughout the sort of courtyards there. 149 stalls downstairs with all the bike parking as well. And then we've got 2 elevator sort of cores for the building. There are the elevators and stairs for each building, one fronting John, one fronting Beacon. Floor plans, I don't think we need to go through all of these. They're fairly explanatory, and I can answer any questions if anybody has those after this. Again, same comment. Elevations are similar to what we'd proposed before. We did put a pitched roof on this time. We just find that the flat roofs for these buildings will be held in as rentals in perpetuity, and flat roofs tend to be more prone to leaks and stuff like that. So this configuration of roof works better for us. So again, that's rear elevations. The renderings, we'll get to that in a minute. The landscape's quite nice in this. We did spend a lot of time working with that interior courtyard and the podium. There's some nice features for residents in there to enjoy. And we can talk about any questions you might have afterwards. It's very sort of detailed landscape plan there. Lots of amenities for folks that would live in this building. And the one request that we're asking for, well, one variance request is just 1.22 meters, and it's just for the balconies coming out so residents can enjoy the space on the balconies and the decorative architectural nibs on the exterior of the building. Everything else complies with the zoning. These are some renderings. This is off Beacon Avenue, street level perspective. And then John Place. Neighborhood context for now. That's the courtyard. And there you go. Thank you very much. And if you've got any questions, we're all here to answer those.
Great, thank you very much. That's
Thanks.
Mr. Davies, right?
Yeah, thank you.
So at this point, I will open it up for public participation. So is there anybody in the audience that would like to come and address council with regards to this particular development application? I'll open it for a first time. And a second time. And a third time. And seeing no one, I'll close public participation and I'll pass it over to staff and Ms. Verhagen.
Good evening, thank you. As was mentioned, this is an application for a development permit and a development variance permit for 2 4-story multi-unit residential buildings. The applicant gave a good overview of the changes that have been made since the last time committee of the whole saw this proposal. That was back in November 2024 that this first came to Committee of the Whole, so I'm sure we all remember that. Page 2 of the staff report gives a good overview of the revisions that were made to the proposal, including the addition of these 2 properties to the west that were added on to the original property, 2114 Beacon West, where the application was proposed. The number of units has increased by 44 up to 180 units now. Regarding the setback variance that's requested, it's important to note that the property lines as they are now, the building conforms to the zoning bylaw completely. The reason that they would need a setback variance is because we would be taking road dedication off both the south lot line, Beacon Avenue West, and the north lot line, Jan Place, in order to achieve the goals for frontage improvements in that area. And getting the road dedication there is built into the zoning bylaw, the RM7WS zone. So that's right in the zoning bylaw. And the applicant is willing to give those road dedication areas so that we can do the frontage improvements in those areas. Another thing that I'll note is at the end of the staff report, there is a recommendation about referring this to BC Transit for comment, along with a request for planned increased service in this area. Given the probable increase in population in this neighborhood as properties redevelop with multifamily residential uses like this, having increased transit service there would be a real benefit for people living and working in this neighborhood. So it was recently brought to our attention that BC Transit is already planning to do this. There was some public engagement earlier this year, and they've said now that the changes will most likely take effect later in 2025 or early 2026. So there is information on the BC Transit website about the changes that they will be making for increased service in this West Side industrial area. They're planning changes to routes 81, 82, 83, 85, 87, and 88, which will offer better service, better connections on the peninsula between Sydney, Brentwood, Saanich, and through the Sayout First Nation. Also better connection to the ferry terminals and improved service to the West Sydney industrial area. So as staff, we were really happy to see that's already happening. So it would be up to council to choose whether to include that part of the recommendation or not at this point, since the service improvements are already proposed. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. I'll open the floor up to committee members. Anybody would like to ask questions of the applicant or staff? Oh, Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Very impressive. I think it's great to have such a building in Sydney. I've got just 2 questions. I think it was mentioned somewhere either in the presentation or in the architect's letter that it was decided to forego storage space for the additional parking and bicycle storage. I look closely at the detail of the individual apartments, and I don't see any dedicated storage space within the apartments. Maybe I'm not looking properly, but do you envisage that as being a problem, given that these will be rentals and people will be coming with stuff that they might have to store? We don't want to start seeing balcony storage, I guess, is the concern.
I agree. Well, they are predominantly 1 bedrooms, 124 was it? Yeah. So with those, we've found that people don't have a ton of extra things and they're not huge 1 bedrooms. So there is storage facilities around the immediate area. There's the U-Haul. U-Haul is actually expanding their site substantially. So that would, if there was anything substantial, that would probably be stored off-site in a facility of that sort. And the company that we partnered with on this, Woodsmere Holdings, has all the data, I think, on what people tend to store and stuff like that. But they have several thousand apartment units, and I don't think they have storage lockers in many of the buildings, is it? In any of them, and it seems to be working just fine.
Okay, thank you. And just out of curiosity, 180 units, it's a brand new build. I assume the spaces will be heated, but will they be air conditioned as well?
Yes, That's, I believe that's part of the new building code, but they will be air conditioned, yes.
So there, will it be centralized or mini splits
Uh,
thing?
Would it be mini split or yeah, mini split? Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a new one that is out now where you don't actually have to have the heat pump on the balcony. It's kind of a more compact unit. It's a through wall unit. So the technology is getting better for that kind of stuff, and which will likely be implemented here.
Thank you, that's all.
Okay, Councillor Rintoul.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. And, generally my first reaction is to be supportive of the variance simply because I think what's being proposed here adds livability to the complex, meaning the balcony space in particular. Without that, I think I would, really struggle with this project. And I'll give you the opportunity maybe to elaborate on sort of those livable components as well. I was very pleased to hear the response to the question with respect to heating and cooling, HVAC, because I think that's really important, particularly in that area, the exposure that's there. But highlight again, please, what's making this particularly livable for the residents, other than the sort of center courtyard area, and speak to that. I'll give you that opportunity. The other piece that I'd like following that, Scott, is if you could chat about access and egress and the rationale in terms of why it's not on Beacon West and it's on Jan Place. So I'll pause there and yield to you.
Yeah, I think I'll call on the architects or the Nick from Victoria Design for that. But I think the rationale of the neighborhood is sort of is crying for this type of housing, because you've got all of the good paying jobs around that neighborhood. So I mean, we have provided some amenities. We can't, and there is amenities all through Sydney's. Living in Sydney's somewhat of an amenity, and it's close. It's across the highway. It's close to get to. You could walk to downtown. You could walk here in a few minutes. So that's an amenity. The fact that you're close to your work, if somebody was this workforce housing, if this was intended as a workforce housing, and which it sort of is with all the good jobs, when we all know who the good employers are around there, Viking Air, you got Thrifty Foods Distribution, you got Amazon and Slags and all kind. We all know the good jobs around there. So that a lot of those folks are coming in from on a bus from downtown Victoria or Langford every day. So it's kind of nice to be able to be so close to work and be able to either ride your bike or walk or drive to work. And again, there's all kinds of things that are around here. There's beaches, there's parks, there's recreation centers and stuff. So I think there's plenty of amenities for it. Just being in this sort of good location is an amenity itself. And I can ask Nick to maybe speak to some of the other stuff that questions that you'd asked.
Hi. Yeah, I believe the other question you had was about the access on Jan Place as opposed to, say, Beacon Ave. And I believe it's in either the West Side Local Area Plan or in the zoning. They request that the access into this type of building not be on Beacon Ave and to be off the other street like Jan Place. So that was the reasoning for having the entrances both to the underground parkade and the surface parkade off of Jan Place.
Thank you. Perhaps I'll use that as an opportunity to segue to staff at this point and ask the staff just to clarify whether or not the town is, given the recent expansion of infrastructure on Beacon West, referring to the roundabout in particular and its capacity that was built in for future residential complexes, does that remain, or perhaps you can comment on the suggestion that Jan Place is the preferred route for access and egress for projects of this nature?
Ms. Clary?
Sure. Through to Councillor Rintoul, that's correct that the preference is to get accesses off of Beacon Avenue West. It's better for transportation and also for an active transportation corridor as we do improve the both cycling and pedestrian infrastructure along Beacon Avenue West, removing the vehicles turning into driveways along that already busy route. Beacon Avenue West will be the busiest street in Sydney, and it already is a very busy street as it is. So just reducing the conflict between pedestrians and cyclists and vehicles was the priority there.
Okay, thank you. One final, if I can, just to go back to the applicant. just to refresh my memory with respect to this, your intent at one point was that these were going to be rentals or condominium strata?
Yeah, well, I think when it was the 136 units, it was going to be condos, or could have been rentals, but now 100%, it's definitely going to be rentals in perpetuity. Yeah.
Cheers. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Really like a lot of the changes that you make, like the outdoor amenity space, indoor amenity space as well are nice improvements to see, and of course the additional parking. One thing I was wondering about the outdoor amenity space is whether you've given any consideration or whether there would be space there for garden plots. And the reason I say that is that there's, with more people living in condos and apartments, we've had lots of requests for people wanting to have a little space to have a garden plot. And so whether that might be something that would be, you could fit in with those outdoor amenity spaces, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good idea. We hadn't considered it, but it's something that we could talk about in our group and potentially consider. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, that would, I think a lot of people would find that attractive.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, it's a good idea.
In your report, you mentioned that these were going to be attainable rental units. What does attainable mean to you?
Just something that somebody could afford on a living wage.
Okay, so they're going to be market rates, and I gather from your previous comments that you're looking to tap into the local workforce as being your kind of target market.
Yeah, well, the research that we've done, it shows that it's severely underserved.
Yeah.
And like I said, a lot of people are coming in from Langford, the West Shore, and Victoria.
Yeah, okay. Nice to hear that they're all going to be rentals. I'm just curious, what's kind of shifted?
It's just the whole business case of the whole shifted. We started talking to the Jardresco family, and that's their main business, and they own and manage lots and lots and lots of apartments. So it's nice to be with some people that really know what they're doing. Okay. And so that sort of changed the business case for me, and and it's something that the town needs out here, I think, and it's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, good. So you're expecting these to be in perpetuity, so you're not planning to stratify them then?
No.
Okay. One other thing I was wondering is, you did have the capacity to go higher there, and I'm wondering whether that was considered, the different levels of government are offering money for affordable housing or, that sort of thing, whether you considered tapping into that. And I ask because this is such a great parcel.
It is.
That you guys have.
It's actually, it's one of the last big ones.
It's one of the last pieces of land that we have any opportunity to make a dent in that.
No, I agree. But the problem is, if you add more units, it's just more parking, and I don't think there's any opportunity to get even one more stall on that site.
Yeah.
And it sort of fits in a little with the neighborhood. Sydney's predominantly 4 stories. I think there's a couple of 5 and 6, but that was kind of the.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And just one more question or comment. The outdoor spaces and amenity spaces and the indoor ones, is it in your mind about making sure they're accessible for people who have mobility devices?
Sorry, which would the ground floor parking spaces?
No, not the apartments, the amenity spaces.
Oh,
so that I appreciate that 20% of the units will be adaptable, so people using wheelchairs or mobility devices, so that's great. But one of the things we often hear from that community is if they manage to get one of those apartments, sometimes they can't access those amenity spaces because there's steps to go up or the doors aren't big enough. So I'm just wondering if that's kind of on your radar.
Yeah, is that, yeah, they're all adaptable, they're all, yeah.
Excellent, okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Duck?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Just following up on my colleague's question regarding egress onto John Place. Is there a rationale why the egress was put in the northeast corner versus the northwest corner? Just that you're halfway down John Place when you're egressing out of the northeast, and I'm wondering why it wasn't pushed up closer.
Yep,
just to
I'll leave
traffic.
that to Nick.
Yeah, I believe we wanted to get an additional unit on that northeast corner, and because we had the surface parking, we have the parking coming in through. Maybe I'll just flip back to the area so we can, that parking plan here, first floor plan. So on the west side, we have the entrance to the surface parking coming in through there, and the only place where we could put any additional unit is on that north, or sorry, were you talking about that north?
Yeah, the northeast corner, you've got the egress from the underground parking, is that correct? That's from the diagram I'm looking at.
Oh, then, no, sorry, the egress from the underground parking is actually into, that was, I think on our previous proposal, we had that, but the egress from the underground parking actually goes up through each lobby. So, so in the center of the building is the elevators and the stairs, and they actually egress out through there or through the ramp on the northeast side.
Right, so the cars come up through the northeast corner of the property, right?
That's right, yeah.
Right, that's my question, is that
Yeah.
the egress, why is that on that? And you explained it, such because that's your access to your above ground parking. So I'm just wondering, now you have two egress points for cars, both above ground and below ground, that are on either side of the building.
Oh yeah, so the other reason too was working with the grade of the site as well. So on that east side of Jan Place, the grade's actually lower, so there's less of a percent slope that we need to have to get into the garage. So that was our reasoning for putting the entrance to the underground parking on the east side, northeast.
Okay, just a consideration, because you're now creating two traffic points on the, either side of the building, so something to think about.
Yeah.
And if that's great, thank you for that.
Okay.
And if I can at this point, Chair, through to staff, the requested variance on the Beacon West side, what's the actual distance now from the road verge to the wall of the building? Like, what's the difference there? Looks like from the diagram, I'm seeing 13 meters, but I'm not sure if I'm seeing that correctly.
So the building setbacks were 4.5 meters. The balconies and eaves project 1.52 meters into the required front setback. So 4.5 minus 1.52.
So from the edge of the street to that front of that balcony is going to be about 3 meters. Give or 3
Yeah.
meters plus,
Approximately 3
Yeah.
meters.
so 10 feet.
And when you say the edge of the street, it'll be the property line, which would not be the curb edge of the travel lanes of the road. There'll
That's
be
what I'm asking, just what-
boulevard, sidewalk, some landscaping, a multi-use path. There'll be things happening between where the vehicles are and the front of the building.
That was my
Yeah.
question, is just kind of what that distance is, and I think
Yeah.
it's looking like about 13 meters from road verge to sort of the edge of the building.
Yeah, I don't have that number offhand.
Okay.
no, sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll look to anybody else who wants to be a first-time speaker. I have Councillor Duncan and Mayor McNeil-Smith. Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. I just want to follow up the access egress again from colleagues, but my first is through you, Chair, to staff, and that is in terms of entertaining access egress off Beacon Avenue West. If it was to be on Beacon Avenue West, MODI would likely not permit left-hand turns onto Beacon Avenue West, and they would all egress would be diverted to the west and have to go through the traffic circle. Thank you. So again, just to follow up on Councillor Duck, so if I'm understanding, the access and egress to the underground parking is from the northeast corner. Is that correct? And then on the northwest corner is the access egress just to the surface parking. We appreciate that, you know, there may be some variation in the property slope and results, as you've indicated, a slightly less slope for the access egress to the underground. However, it's at least 5 more properties into the neighborhood off the northeast corner. And I forget what the split was. In the presentation, you gave the split of what the surface parking is to the underground parking. It's well over 100, 130 or whatever it is, and then 30 some odd, or 150, and then 30 some odd in the surface parking. So you're gonna have, I don't know, 3/4, 2/3 to 3/4 of the parking have to go that much deeper down John Place to do the access egress in the underground, where a very small portion of the residents are using the surface parking lot. I realize slope is a factor, but I think it would make a significant difference for the neighborhood if you were to reverse those 2 access egress to the underground and to the surface. If you could perhaps speak to it again. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry. One other thing on that side, on the west side, there's also a service right-of-way as well. So I believe that was another reason why we didn't put the access to the access to the underground on the west side.
Sorry, could I interject for just a moment? Could you perhaps go to the landscape plan? It just shows the property a little, yeah, it just shows a little easier to see there. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so on the west side there, we're accessing to the surface parking. There's actually a 3-meter service right of way where I believe it's the stormwater lines are going to be going through there. And yeah, we would have to, well, I mean, we can have the sort of surface parking go over that area, but the underground parking would definitely affect that. So that was another reason why we chose to put the surface parking on the west side and the underground pathway or entrance on the east. And then there's also the pedestrian pathway that connects Beacon Avenue and Jam Place is on that east side as well. And I think just felt it was worked better to have that underground parking entryway through there, and you can have guards all up along that side as well to prevent any pedestrian traffic from pedestrians from interfering with traffic.
Okay, certainly appreciate the additional information. You know, there is rationale to this. I think you know, we will hear from the neighborhood, just given the significance of this development to the neighborhood. And while it's positive for Sydney, you know, we do consider the impacts on the neighborhood, and having those responses or information for the neighborhood when they express interest or concern will be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I'll leave my comment till the motion's on the floor. Yes, thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Since Councillor Duggan, okay.
I'd be prepared to move the motion.
Sorry, I just have, I do have,
You've
I have one quick question, because it was something in the staff report and I couldn't find it on my map. So they mentioned an addition of a loading zone, and I'm trying to figure out where that would be. I couldn't actually, for clarification.
The loading zone's on the first floor plan, and so basically where the surface parking comes into between the 2 buildings, it's really on the west side. There's like a yellow rectangle there on the west side of the property where the property jogs. That's where the loading zone is. Okay. And really it allows, there's no building overhanging that area at all, so it's completely clear. So a moving van or whatnot could go straight in and back straight out and not interfere with any of the building projections.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councillor Duncan, you want to move a motion? Sure. Oh, wait, sorry. Second time question, Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Getting back to the egress and ingress again. Well, I recognize that Modi would not support people coming out onto Beacon and turning left. They would have to go up the street and around the roundabout, which to me is not, I don't think that's a huge inconvenience, I don't think. Is that, based on the layout, is that something that is feasible to have the people coming in and out off of Beacon Avenue West because they could come onto Beacon, heading west and turn right into the complex. And if they were coming out, it would just mean they'd have to turn right again, go around the roundabout and come back towards the highway. Just looking at different options to mitigate the impact on John.
Yeah, I don't think I understood the question. So you're talking about Moto?
If I could just interject just for a second, staff would like to weigh in.
Okay.
Ms. Claire?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, that's not something that staff would support at this time. We're trying to, the West Side Local Area Plan does identify Beacon as having no accesses to the residential properties along Beacon Avenue West, because it really does improve active transportation along that corridor when it's such a busy vehicle traffic laneway already. So that's really the direction we're moving, to get driveways off of Beacon Avenue West and have all of the driveways come off of John Place.
Right, okay, thanks for that. That's all.
I'll check one last time if there's anybody a second time that would like to ask questions. No? Okay. Councillor Duggan.
No, thank you. I'm going to move the original recommendation with a small edit for about BC Transit. So the development permit application number DP100847 and development variance permit application number DV100359 for 2114 Beacon Avenue West, 2098 Beacon Avenue West, and 2107 John Place be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for further review and comment, and be referred to BC Transit for comment.
Second.
Motivator?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything not to like about this changed application. I think it got all of the points that we asked for, and now having dedicated rental, it was all that we could hope for. And I think the applicant's done a good job here. I still have it being referred to BC Transit for comment, simply because I want to make sure that as they are changing these routes, that they know that this is coming, and if there's any impact, there's a bus stop right nearby, that they just see it.
Councillor Duck?
I support this going forward to APC. I still have concerns about the egress and traffic pattern on John, because that's going to put a significant load. And as Mayor pointed out, the balancing of that egress is going to be heavily loaded to the east versus the west. So we'll see what comes back from APC. Thank you.
Anyone else like to provide comment? Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. I support the motion and do appreciate the changes. I think the addition of the two additional properties allow change the project substantially, but for the better. And many of the changes, whether it's the roof, whether it's the amenities, and so on. Likewise, with regards to access and egress, this motion does look to forward it to our Advisory Planning Commission, which is a citizen body, and we will appreciate their input, and we will hear from residents as well on large-scale projects such as this. I do support it, the reference or the referral to BC Transit, and thank staff for the comment made during their remarks. I would just, through you, Chair, through to staff, while it's referring this particular development application to BC Transit, we know over the past 6 years that we saw the new Titan Boats facility, we saw the Amazon facility, we now see the 130 unit hotel under construction. We know 2180, which is 140 rental units, and now this 180 units will all significantly impact the opportunity for increased transit there. And so I'm not sure if staff have made references to any of those previous projects, whether they were on airport lands or on the Sydney side to transit, but perhaps request to staff, or if they could comment, that we could make reference to all of those in addition to this particular referral, add that additional information about those recent changes. I'm sure they're perhaps aware of it, and that's one of the reasons they've chosen to increase service, in the coming year or two. But I think just reinforcing it with that information that's available. I'll leave that just as a comment. Thank you, and thank you again. Oh, sorry. I do have one last comment. In the letter of rationale, which was concise and spoke to the main points, including the variance request. Language is used twice. Once on the second page of the letter, support the delivery of affordable rental units for future tenants. And then in the paragraph, 2 paragraphs below, 180 attainable rental housing units. Housing has been the #1 priority for this council and previous councils, as I'm sure you're aware. We appreciate the experience of Woodsmere Holdings. Went to the website and see the other projects you've done in BC and Alberta and elsewhere in the region, and projects of this scale and type, sort of thing. But in the region, at council, we use the term affordable when it is geared to income, when it's you know, that threshold of income. And the term attainable is only used when it is below market. So anybody reading this, any member of the public, there tend to be that impression of when the terms affordable and attainable are used, that is the expectation. So I would just express a caution that there could be expectations from the public in how those terms are used. We appreciate how you've spoken to this project and how it fits in Sydney, and Sydney is amenity in itself. Sort of thing, but just those comments with regards to attainable and affordable. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll just have a couple comments and and thank you for the presentation and thanks for taking questions tonight. Yeah, this is a much improved from the first, and it just goes to show that if there's a will, there's a way. A couple of small things that I noticed in there that maybe didn't pop out to others. The fact that there'd be a full-time property manager on site, I think don't see that all the time, and that's a really good extra benefit for this development should it move forward. Having the balconies on the north and south as opposed to east and west, giving the privacy to the people that are in the homes on the east and west side, I think is important. And we're early on in the process, and so I do like the amenity space in the middle. I think there's so much greenery in there, even along the path on the east side. I think that's important, and planting more trees than you're removing, because that area really needs that, given its proximity to the industrial area. Just a word of hope, I guess, a seed to plant in you as you move forward, and if it does move along the line to be approved at some point, and you'll work with staff as far as a construction management plan. This is the biggest development in Sydney in terms of apartments, and this is going to have a dramatic impact on the neighborhood. So I would just hope that you're cognizant and how you conduct your work on that site, and be mindful that this will have a very, very real impact on the neighbors, and just try to minimize and mitigate it as much as you possibly can. Thank you. And so with that, I'll move the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wait a minute for some of the crowd to clear out. Okay, next on the agenda, we're going to be moving to 8A1, which was formerly 6B, and this is the presentation from Urban Systems on the development and amenity cost charges, and we have a presenter, Laura Bernier. Is it Bernier or Bernier? Bernier. Okay, and so the floor will be yours.
Wonderful. Good evening. Thank you for having me. So tonight we wanted to do a very brief overview of the proposed DCC and ACC rates. If I can get this working. So really, DCCs and ACCs are intended as a whole to ensure that the town is collecting enough funding to be able to build infrastructure projects, capital infrastructure that's required to service growth in the community. As we just heard, there is growth occurring, and there's a number of projects in new housing and new people and residents that will require additional services. So throughout this project, we've been developing an update to the DCC bylaw, as well as proposing a new ACC bylaw as well. So really today, we're here to familiarize council with the program and the proposed rates. There has been already some information that's been provided through another session. So we'll go through some of the kind of theoretical pieces around the DCCs and the ACCs relatively quickly, but always happy to come back and ask questions about anything that's on those slides. So today we're hoping to receive some direction on being able to move these draft rates forward to do some some developer engagement on the draft rates, and then to also get confirmation to move forward with the proposed municipal assist factor on the program. So as I mentioned, we'll go through some of those kind of more technical inputs a little bit more quickly, but we can come back to any slide that's there. We'll also show the proposed program and rates, as well as some key implementation elements that are important to the program, and then lots of room for discussion. So in a nutshell, the DCCs are really intended to fund one-time capital infrastructure projects. Some really key operative pieces here is that they are not intended for asset renewal, and they're really intended to support growth. So the idea here is really to cost share the costs of infrastructure, and that's built in throughout the tool to ensure that there's equitable, fair approaches to delivering infrastructure. They're a provincially regulated tool, so there are some ins and outs. They aren't the most flexible tool as they're regulated by the province and the Local Government Act. There is new legislation, as I'm sure folks are familiar with, Bill 46, which has allowed for a wider spread of services. Not all communities have updated their DCCs to include things like protective services, so you'll see that there's still communities that are coming online to update and increase their DCCs, while Sydney's actually in a really great position right now to update the DCCs and include those scopes of services. So a couple of notes on DCCs and ACCs. They're intended to foster fairness and equitability between sharing the costs of infrastructure for developers and existing taxpayers. As I mentioned, those are built into some of the leveraging tools of the way that the project costs are split. And it's really intended to be transparent. So all of those projects and those cost splits are available to developers. It also ensures certainty, so when developers are coming in, they know the exact cost of, what those costs of development are based on the DCCs, and build that into pro formas rather than having a negotiated approach where developers are required to provide certain infrastructure amenities, and it's a bit of a negotiation for each application. So as I mentioned, it is a really great time to be updating the DCCs based on the new legislation. It has been a very long time since the last update, so it's been since 1998 since they were updated. Moving forward, we'd suggest we probably want to update every 5 years, because that aligns with what's allowed in terms of inflating your rates with the consumer price index in the region. So you're actually able to update that schedule annually according to the CPI without having to go to the inspector of municipalities. As you are, I'm sure, well aware, also huge infrastructure cost increases since 2020, since COVID, and lots of legislation that's changed, so making it a great time. I won't go into too much detail as this was provided. So these are, examples of some of the things that DCCs can fund and cannot fund. The main services are the traditional core services provided by local governments: roads, drainage, water, sewer, and parks. But we also have those protective services that are also there now, so fire and police, as well as solid waste, which is less commonly incorporated into the programs. A key thing here, if it's not growth related, it's not going to be in the DCC program. If it's asset management or operations and maintenance, really those are not DCC eligible. The same applies to ACCs. So they, again, have to be growth related, and they cover a different suite of services. So these are a new service that can be covered, and projects can be community and youth centers, recreation, library, daycare facilities, public squares, as well as parks. Some parks projects. So you have to make sure that there's no overlap between different tools like ACCs and DCCs. However, there's many parks projects that are not eligible under DCCs. Those are potential projects for ACCs. So that's what you see a little bit in that proposed ACC rate, is capturing some, unique youth type facilities, things like a basketball court. That's not DCC eligible, but it would be eligible under ACCs. So a few things to note here. The DCCs and ACCs can be captured at one of two times: subdivision and building permit. Subdivision's really for low density residential, like single family homes. Everything else is going to be under building permit. So those are really legislated, and there's a lack of flexibility there. We're hearing a lot of, can we charge developers DCC at occupancy, at time of occupancy, or occupancy permit. Unfortunately, with the current legislation, that's not an option, but there's been a lot of talk about that kind of thing. So these are the residential land use categories that we've laid out here. So really, these are intended to reflect some of those new small-scale multi-unit housing types of development that would be occurring in the town of Sydney. So under the low density, you would have both single and two-family type dwelling units, so single-family home or a duplex, each of which would be allowed as of right, without the additional charge, a secondary suite. In the medium density category, you would have more dense types of development like row housing or townhouses and triplexes, mobile homes. We've also included in there the additional suites like detached accessory dwelling units, garden suites, in-law suites, those types of things. So that would be kind of triggering that almost like a third unit in that case if you were building that on a single family home. And then we have high density, relatively straightforward. Those are typically apartment buildings that are stacked, so those typically wouldn't have separate entrances, and so we've built a little bit more form-based approach there. At a really high level, this is how we determine the rates. There's a couple of really key parts of this process that'll be interesting. The first step is determining how Sydney will grow, where growth will occur. Obviously, that's difficult to tell with the small-scale multi-unit housing, so staff and our team has done the best to capture current growth rates as they're expected to happen. And then from there, we determine the capital costs and the timing of projects, and that really builds out the program. From there, there's a benefit allocation that we'll chat about that's included to cost share each of the projects between developers and existing ratepayer or taxpayers. Then we calculate the draft rates. We determine an assist factor, which is the council tool to really determine how much support will go towards these DCCs and towards developers. Feasibility testing has become recommended in the past 6 months about on the ACCs, particularly to ensure that they don't impact development too much. And then consultation, of course, is best practice. And then from there, you kind of have a ministry review and adoption of those rates. I won't get in too much into the growth here. We used best practice as well as some deep consultation with staff to determine what those growth rates would look like. And those are forecasted over about 20 to 30 years, depending on the program. And here the capital cost, you can see, again, typically they range from 20 to 30 year projects based on how growth will occur and what master plans you have in place. And as you get closer to projects, the costs become more clear and detailed, essentially. Happy to speak to any of that in the questions as well. The benefit allocation is a really important tool here to administer the cost sharing of each project. So this is where we really understand a low benefit allocation is going to be a project that does not benefit growth. Where projects are really necessary, you wouldn't be doing it if a developer didn't absolutely require that upsize or that additional treatment facility. You get a high benefit allocation, and that is really where developers will pitch in a little bit more for those projects that are really growth driven. This is actually done on a project by project basis for every single service area. So that's where the cost sharing really starts to fit in, is in this benefit allocation. That's determined through the capacity increases based on master plans for things like water and sewer. For things like parks, we're typically working very closely with staff to determine where growth is occurring and how that project might benefit that area. Another important tool here to differentiate is the municipal assist factor. So where the benefit allocation is really a more technical tool, it's based sometimes on hydraulic modeling and things like that. The municipal assist factor is where council can turn up the lever and support for developers by increasing the amount that the town would contribute towards the program. So currently it's set at 1%, which is the minimum. It has to be between 1 and 99% according to the legislation. So it can be increased or turned down based on contributions towards the development community. This tool is varied by program, so you can't actually vary it by project, let's say. If you want to vary the assistance, you have to vary it by the water program or the sewer program. And it also cannot be varied by land use category, so you can't assist high-density residential uses and then not assist low-density residential uses. That would kind of contradict the principle of equitable and fair distribution of the charges. So that's why that's structured that way. So just to note here, as we were prioritizing, there's long lists of projects, many of which came from master plans that other consultants had provided for those utilities. There was an exercise here in really determining which projects made the list with staff, and that was based on how much benefit was the development community getting out of these projects, what was the timing and the cost of those projects, and then what level of service are you seeking to achieve in the next 5 years or longer. So as you're updating these DCC bylaws, there is an opportunity, if it's a very long-term project, in 5 years you could potentially capture that project in the next iteration. So we did want to focus on some of the most needed projects in the short-term time horizon that had a lot of benefit to the future growth of the community. We've included here just a sample project example that shows how the benefit allocation and the municipal assist factor plays out and is incorporated into those final costs. So this uses about a 35% benefit allocation on a $1 million project, would leave you with a cost share of $346,500 for developers. So just to introduce the draft rates here, and I'm going a little over time, but I'm very close to done. So the draft rates are really structured by area in the current program, which makes it very difficult to compare to kind of the future update, and it requires a lot more administrative burden for staff to actually determine what those rates are. It's a kind of address lookup basis model where you would look up an address and then that would determine what area they are in for each of the programs here. So we do have a comparison for the low density when we get to that. So that was the current model, and this is our proposed program. So you can see here the municipal responsibility, the amount to be paid by DCCs, and the cost per year for each of the programs for both DCCs and ACCs. I've talked a lot about DCCs, but ACCs really do function exactly like a DCC program. It's just for a different suite of services. So from there you get the total rate. You divided this across those land use categories that serve as a proxy for how much infrastructure, how much housing will contribute to the infrastructure burden. So here you'll see low density residential has a much higher DCC. It's assumed that there's a higher number of people living in those units and that most of them have an as of right secondary suite that's embedded there too. So that's what leads to that higher rate. For the ACCs, these are really modest compared to a lot of the ACC updates that are occurring in the region. This does capture a lot of the, as I mentioned, some of those parks projects that are not DCC eligible, but that would benefit the community. I won't go through all the community comparisons, but I do want to speak to this low density residential one. As I've mentioned, a lot of these communities have not yet incorporated fire or police services into their DCCs. So that's where Sydney is capturing some of those new services that others might not show here. And this also does include the regional DCC rate for the Saanich Peninsula water and wastewater supply. So that's also why this comes in a little bit higher than the rate I showed on the previous slide. And if you were to compare that against current rates, I believe we had one address that was coming in at about $730 for their current DCCs, noting that that was from 1998 and is quite an out-of-date rate to be paying for DCCs today. As you can see, the medium density is obviously a little bit lower, as well as high density. And I'll just note here the commercial one in particular. So this is probably the one that will be most commonly administered, is the commercial DCC rate, which is coming in at $105 per square meter. So I did just want to also note the ACCs here. So you can see it's difficult to compare it to the same communities that we had for the DCCs because most communities haven't adopted an ACC program yet. It's still very new. So we have compared it against the ones that do have them. You can see some have adopted very, very high ACC rates. There's quite a lot of variability here. Sydney's definitely coming in on the lower end. Insofar as looking at these charges, developers will see this as one charge to be paying at the end of the day. There won't be very much differentiation between whether the fact that the DCCs are higher and the ACCs are lower. It's one bill for, a bunch of low density units, for instance, that you would be paying. And so there is quite a more modest ACC rate here that would be proposed. I won't go through the engagement too much. Happy to answer questions on this. I did want to cover the in-stream protection to note that any developments that have been submitted and considered complete by staff have a 12 months grace period, and they would be grandfathered in under the old rates. So that's where there is some grace here, as developers have already built pro formas or already considered their costs to be able to move forward with those rates. There's a few exemptions here as well. Happy to answer questions on this. And then here there are some potential waivers and reductions if council chooses to, if there's a desire to incentivize affordable housing or other eligible developments there. So on that note, I know I'm well over time, so I'd like to just open it up to questions, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Bernier. I want to inquire of committee if they would prefer to ask their questions now of the presenter or wait for staff report and then ask questions at the same time. I think we'll go to the staff report next. Item 8A2, Ms. Clary.
Thank you. This staff report complements the presentation just given by Urban Systems. At this time, staff are recommending that we undertake engagement for the DCC and ACC rates proposed in this report, and that staff also report back in the future on potential waivers and reductions bylaw. A waivers and reductions bylaw can be adopted separately as a separate document, so it doesn't have to be done at the same time or concurrently as the DCC and ACC bylaws. We are here to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. So now open the floor to committee members for questions. Councillor Duck.
Yeah, hopefully I have a very simple question. I've seen the different categories of buildings. We have a number of duplexes in Sydney, and I'm wondering where they fit into that. Are they automatically a low density, or because they're not necessarily a triplex, and yet they're a duplex, and if they're allowed to each have a basement suite per se under the low density structure? Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Duck. As we've currently structured it, the duplexes would fall in the low density category, and that's because the way that the small scale multi-unit housing has been proposed, we believe that duplexes and those more dense units are going to become some of the most common uses, and it will be difficult to potentially separate some of those uses. So administratively, having those grouped with some of those single family uses might be a better fit.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Very informative, very helpful. The question I have, well, you actually answered one of my questions, and I was going to ask why the big discrepancy in the fact that we're at the upper end of the DCCs and lower end of the ACCs, but you addressed that by virtue of the fact that the various municipalities are in different stages of their evolution with regard to these charges. But my question now, and I'm not sure if this is for staff or for you, but through the chair, when we talk about high density residential, there's quite a difference at a practical level between rental housing, and we just heard a presentation from a developer who's going to be building large scale residential housing, and the condominium market, which is probably a little more upscale, and they would typically be less dense than apartment type units on a given property. And my question is, why would we not separate out rental housing in the high density as a separate category?
Through the chair. That's a really wonderful question. As the legislation is currently designed, the way that the land use types can be differentiated is by density and land use category. And so I don't think there is really the leverage to be able to differentiate between rental and condominiums in the DCC bylaw. Really where you would want to separate those out is in the assumptions. So essentially what feeds the program is, these land use categories are a proxy for the infrastructure burden that will be placed. The impact that each of these uses will have on water or sewer usage. And so unless there is a very clear demarcation of the people per household in a condominium, and to demonstrate that that would be different than in the rental units, it would be difficult to demonstrate that the impact that those two uses would have would be substantially different to warrant another category for that, unless there had been maybe a study done to demonstrate that discrepancy.
And if naturally the subject of affordable and below market housing comes up in this, if we were as a council wanting to encourage those types of projects, does council have the flexibility to adjust those DCCs on a per project basis, or are we kind of tied into whatever the bylaw states, or do we have to pass a separate bylaw for each project if we want to make a change there?
Through the chair, the DCC bylaws would have to be implemented, in a pretty consistent way for all developers to ensure that fairness. Where there is leverage to be able to waive or reduce DCCs is for the eligible types of development. So that would be for-profit or non-for-profit rental housing. There's a few other categories, low GHG emissions or environmentally friendly, or small unit types. There's also some statutory exemptions for you can potentially have it built into the bylaw where DCCs are waived for small projects for under $50,000. It's up to council's discretion to potentially increase that number. You can increase it to, for instance, $100,000, for instance, and build that directly into the bylaw. So there's a few tools for exemptions that can be altered, or for providing affordable waivers and reductions to certain housing providers. The City of Victoria, for instance, has shifted that framework to be a little bit more flexible and started providing a grants program to support the types of housing development that they would like to see. And so they've shifted the affordable housing reductions to be a little bit more flexible in terms of a grant program that's administered in-house.
So we have a little bit of wiggle room, and there are some tools that we can use to play around with things on a per project basis.
For the eligible types of
Yeah.
development projects that would be considered appropriate for
Yes.
those types of waivers and reductions, there is some flexibility there.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Thank you for presentation. It's a lot to wrap our heads around. Just continuing with my colleague's point on housing and wiggle room and that sort of thing. My takeaway from this is, yes, there is some flexibility, but that we would have to identify that up front. So in the waivers bylaw or whatever, that's going to be done on the side. So for example, if we wanted to incentivize affordable rental units, we would have to identify that specifically in that waiver bylaw. Am I understanding that correctly?
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly it. As long as there's a consistent approach to administering that, that would be a starting point.
So developer can't come along and say, hey, give me a break on this. We have to establish those benchmarks and policies ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Moving on with housing and affordable housing. What I've been trying to figure out here is how ACCs and DCCs work along with our housing policies and what we want to accomplish. And you've talked a little bit about it in terms of the waivers that we could use for affordable housing. And the other thing that's on my mind is I'm looking at, the low, medium, and high density, and we've got the highest DCCs on the low and medium, and I kind of understand the rationale for that. Although when I looked at the best practices guide on this, the province did say that the size of the unit, whether it's low, whether it's, a 3-bedroom single-family house or a 3-bedroom condo, it doesn't necessarily mean that the house would use more infrastructure than the other one. I don't know, any comment or pushback on that, or your interpretation of that?
Through the chair, I might direct, I think there's 2 parts of the question. I think that second part, we can, maybe I'll answer that one first. In terms of the per square, whether you're charging by unit or per gross floor area, there's trade-offs to both of those. We do see that where you're charging on a square floor area basis, you can really drive smaller unit sizes. However, some people have gone that route, trying to be a little bit more equitable in terms of how those are paid over different types of land use categories. In terms of concern on the types of development and the infrastructure burden they place, I'm not familiar with that passage. I'll have to go back to the best practice guide, but where we're seeing more vertical density, there is typically a much lower burden placed on infrastructure just by virtue of distribution being much more compact. So where there is, lots of single family housing, you would get a much larger distribution network versus being able to provide the same services in a vertical tower to, many more housing units. So that's where we are trying to make that discrepancy between high density uses and single family homes, for instance. In terms of how this aligns with the town's housing policies and goals, I might defer to staff to answer that piece.
Oh, okay, sure.
Sure, through to Councillor O'Keefe. Just the DCC bylaw is really meant to offset the costs related to growth-driven infrastructure for future population. So if we do not bring in a DCC or ACC bylaw, all future growth-related infrastructure will the future tax base will bear those costs. So it's really to bring equity and fairness to our infrastructure improvements over time, and it's not necessarily going to stimulate development in any way, but it will make sure the town will be able to afford to continue to provide the services that need to be provided for the growing population without significantly burdening the future tax base.
Yeah, thank you for that. And sorry.
Mr. Clare, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Just adding on to what our Director of Engineering said too. There are, as our presenter alluded to, there are other ways of providing support to affordable housing projects beyond the waiver approach as well. There's the granting program, but as our Director of Engineering said, there is a discrete and definitive cost to infrastructure for development, and this is the best way to attribute to those costs. The sort of adage that folks go by is development pays for development, and if council chooses to support that development, be it for rental or affordable rental or what have you, there could be a grant program or a separate fund that could be established, like a housing affordability fund, and that DCC charge would still be paid, but it would just be paid through a grant or through that reserve fund rather than a waiver in its entirety. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the cost doesn't disappear, it still exists. And then additionally, to the question about the difference between low density and high density, just the linear distance for providing services to low density community neighborhoods is just far greater than that for high density. And so be it water, sewer, roads, that kind of a thing, you're automatically looking at a higher cost for the capital charge. The user charges are all the same, so for the consumption charge, that is, but for the actual capital cost to service those lower density communities is just naturally higher.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you for that. What else did I want to ask you? In terms of the rates, so yeah, we saw that ACCs are low, and you explained, why that is. But I don't know if we talked too much about my understanding from looking at the graphs, and just side note, the graphs were kind of tricky to interpret because some of the colors blended in. So maybe on the next iteration, more delineation between the reds and the blacks and blues. Anyways, but my takeaway was that it looked like our DCCs for Sydney were among the highest within the CRD. And so I'm wondering, is that because they haven't revised theirs yet? Like, is our comparison based on, what they've had for years, and they are still going to upgrade theirs or update them? I'm just trying to understand that a bit more, why we're so high compared to the others.
Thank you, through the chair. I completely agree. I was squinting myself to, take a look at which ones had fire versus parks. So on this graph, I will just note, so Oak Bay is the only municipality, for instance, that has a fire DCC. So in terms of the other communities that you're seeing, you'll see like Victoria had recently updated last year, as have some of the other communities. However, they haven't necessarily included the protective services in that update. For instance, Victoria went through a very massive increase in this past DCC update that they did, and so fire and police is something that they will choose to incorporate moving forward. However, they wanted to stagger those updates to help curb some of the big leaps that they were doing in their rates. So with that in mind, as others start to incorporate these new services into the rates, we will see a rise of other communities that will likely outpace Sydney. Sydney is not so far beyond other services that they won't start to come into alignment when these services are wrapped around each other and start to see more comprehensive updates in each of the communities.
Oh, yeah. Okay, and I just stick with this for a second. Would it also be the case, is it the case with smaller municipalities? Because we have fewer people, or maybe fewer growth to spread the costs around, that our DCCs are likely to be higher, or is that not a factor?
I don't think that would be a factor in, we've been incorporated in quite a number of these throughout the province. Some very large communities have massive DCCs in the most recent updates. So there's not a strict correlation between those two things with the size of the community. I'd say the increase, really where we see some increased costs is if there's a large backlog in infrastructure, where there's a need to, even though that's a little bit more towards renewal, sometimes we might see delayed upgrades that haven't come to play, and then as growth is triggered, it becomes an increasing need to have those completed. So that can be a factor, and then, really being timely with updates can help support smaller adjustments through time rather than larger leaps, which, I think the development community is relatively aware are coming, just based on, I think, the legislation that's changed and has occurred, and based on the fact that other communities are and have been charging these rates, at a much higher rate than Sydney has been charging for the past 27 years. And so that's where we are seeing potentially a little bit of a higher increase, is just, being able to address some of those issues.
Right, okay. Yeah, that's great, thank you.
Councillor Rintoul?
Chair, if I may just adding on to that, thank you. I just wanted to note that, in the Lower Mainland, for example, many of the larger municipalities, for their low density DCC, would be double of what we're proposing here.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, for the insight this evening. And not sure if this is for you or staff, but you mentioned protective services and referenced Victoria in particular, and how they'll look to see this revised to include fire and police potentially. I don't think you mentioned fire, but you did mention police. I noticed in our staff report the rationale, just based on the age of infrastructure, essentially referring to the community safety building, for example, or the detachment building itself in the case of policing. Was there further rationale to not look to include those at this time around that cost and what might happen overall with this cost comparative if we were to include them at this time? Because I would suggest that probably we've seen as recently as this past budget where our fire services were looking for some infrastructure improvements to the existing facility, which as I recall we did not pursue on the basis that we were concerned with our budget. And so it would seem to me it may well be timely to actually include something like fire service in this, at least at this point in time. So I'll pause there to look at staff to see if there is further rationale aside from the age of the buildings for not including fire service at this time under DCC.
Mr. Hsiek?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as fire services go, our facility is very new. This is a 20-year capital plan that is supporting the DCC rates that we're bringing forward at this time, and there's nothing really on the horizon for growth-related fire infrastructure at this time. Similarly with our CMP, while we have started having preliminary talks about potential expansion, we really did not want to slow down this process in order to advance those. We foresee perhaps picking it up in the next iteration, but because we have nothing on in the current 20-year horizon, we just didn't want to further delay this project to try and capture everything.
I was just going to potentially add to that as well, and Mr. Hsiek's good comments there. I think some of the trends that we are seeing as well is that some of the larger communities are preparing for some of those expansions of those facilities in a way that I think smaller communities, there is a little bit of forecasting that's being done, especially in City of Victoria's areas or Oak Bay, where they're doing some future planning to scale those facilities up based on the fact that they haven't been upgraded in a very, very long time or are really bursting at the seams, and really have some clear identifiable capital projects that will need to occur to make those happen. It does create, a very staggering, those facilities are very, very expensive and costly, and so it does create quite a large program to then have to have developers pay the costs for.
Thank you, and I guess that maybe leads to the suggestion that, and I don't see a category here that it would immediately fall under, but facilities that support the administration of the town, for example, a town hall or a municipal parks facility. I know we've seen that happening in Saanich. Would that fall under any of these existing categories that Sydney is looking to move forward with?
Through the chair, unfortunately, those types of facilities aren't DCC eligible at this point in time. So it really does have to be a protective service building. For instance, like a tri-services building, you'd be able to capture the cost for the police and fire. However, the cost for that municipal building might get excluded in those fire and police programs. So that's where there's, definitely some legislative kind of rules that are in place to that challenge that. For instance, a public works building, even you have to really clearly demonstrate that there's a solid waste component of that public works building to be able to include that in the program. And if it reads as just regular public works, it's not DCC eligible, for instance.
Thank you.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. Could we go to the slide of one of the comparators, please? Yeah. Any of them will do. So appreciating a colleague's previous questions and the responses from the presenter and from staff, really where we land in terms of DCC comparison is foundational to the DCCs that we're choosing to have. And in the staff report, we have the projects that were scoped out, for the next time, for that long time period. And this is where the calculation lands when you look at what the benefit is to the growth, when that calculation was made. So we have the projects as foundational, we have determining the level of benefit, and it really brings us to where we land here. And so there really isn't a choice that we want to position ourselves, you know, amongst the DCCs. It's really relative to the infrastructure, our infrastructure needs over the next 20 years. Would that be a reasonable assessment? Yeah.
Through the chair, that's correct. I think the real opportunity to decrease this would be through that municipal assist factor, and as it's been stated, that really has to be made up through other non-DCC revenues, you know, i.e. typically general taxation. So, you know, that would be the one lever to turn things down. Otherwise, you're really looking at getting into level of service conversations about, you know, what infrastructure is going to be able to be delivered.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I do have 3 or 4 more questions. If we could go to the slide on definitions, please. So appreciating these very specific definitions, and then when looking at the comparator slides, you see the same low density, medium density, high density. Where did these definitions come from? Is it something that we're choosing to use because of others, or it's best practice, or?
It's really a combination of, you know, I think of many things. You know, best practice is maybe a bit of a flexible term with DCCs. There's many ways to create a program. These are not, you know, totally rigid. There are opportunities to, I think about definitions and create things that are tailored to different communities based on their need. Many communities in the region are looking at this type of model. Which does mean that when building within the CRD, it creates some consistency for developers to go from one community and understand those rates and be able to adopt them. I think where, you know, there's quite a bit of thinking that does go into these. And so, for instance, with secondary suites, that's one where, based on our experience working in many communities, it's very difficult to capture, you know, charging a rate for DCCs, as there's many informal secondary suites that are occurring in housing. So that's where I think there's, you know, a mix of professional judgment here, best practice in terms of ensuring that the timing is going to make sense with the rates that are being charged. So there are, I think, many components that go into this, but happy to answer any more specifics on it.
Yeah, so I think what I'm hearing then is that when we look at the comparator charts, we see low density, medium, and high. The definitions may not be identical through all of those comparator municipalities, but this is the best comparison we can make.
Correct. When comparing different communities, we do try to adjust for known variability. So, for instance, if there's additional categories, we will, you know, incorporate those assumptions into the comparison to create a comparison that makes the most apples to apples. Comparison. Sometimes there's some differences, hence why it was difficult to include Sydney's original rate into that comparison, because it was really apples to oranges.
Great, thank you. If through you, Chair, if we could go to the next slide, please. So I appreciate during the presentation going through each of these boxes, if you will, and you did make a brief comment with regards to feasibility testing. Can you just expand on that? I'm not understanding or appreciating it in a practical sense. What happens there?
Absolutely. So the feasibility testing is something that's recently come through the DCC and ACC best practices guides, which were only released in the March of this year. This project obviously started far before that those practice guides came out. The feasibility testing is required for amenity cost charges. So it is required to understand that it doesn't create a significant impediment or barrier to development. With the rates being at $600 per low density unit, the ACCs are, based on my experience, likely not going to be an impediment to development in and of themselves. However, the best practice guide does ask for those rates to be cumulatively looked at over the whole to understand what barriers to development will occur. And there is, you know, some examples provided in that best practice guide that support understanding how municipalities can do that effectively. Realistically, the ACCs need to create a similar level of service that pre-existed the bylaw, essentially.
Thank you. If we could jump a few slides, I think, to the municipal assist factor slide. So it was indicated in the presentation, it's in the staff report, that council has complete discretion to set an assist factor between 1% and 99%. The recommendation, if I can perceive it as that in the report, is that we begin at 1%. I'm wondering why we're at 1% and why it doesn't start at 0, but and I think there was an indication that other jurisdictions pretty much start at 1%. Is there a range out there for that assist factor?
It's a great question. So the reason it starts at 1% is because through the legislation, municipalities are required to assist with the development cost charges. So at 0%, you would be providing no assistance. So that's where that 1% comes from. Most municipalities do choose to set it at 1%. However, where costs are very challenging for developers, for instance, for large treatment plants, or really large pieces of capital infrastructure that will make it very difficult to attract development. We've seen assist factors as high as 25%, can be created really and kind of for a treatment plant specific program that can be created. Other municipalities are choosing to assist between 1 and 10% more commonly, I'd say, but the most common I've seen is 1% by far.
And so whatever the percentage is, it would be across all DCCs?
It would be across each service area. So every service category, for instance, water will be set at 1%. Sewer could be set at 5%, for instance. So each service category would have a different percentage, or they can all be at 1%.
Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's also important to keep in mind that the benefiting factor also results in the municipality providing a significant portion of the actual cost. Having previously been the Deputy Inspector of Municipalities and seeing all DCC bylaws come through the office, more often than not, it's the assist factors at 1%. And you know, staff would sometimes chuckle as to why anybody would go above 1%, because there is that benefiting factor where municipalities are still contributing a significant portion. That benefiting factor, though, that the municipal proportion is for, is to support the non-growth element. However, it's just an estimate. And so with certainty, municipalities are still supporting new development, even with just a 1% assist factor. So.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to my next question. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I'll. As the only one who hasn't asked a question, is Councillor Duncan. Do you have anything?
No, thank you. I was on the Regional Water Supply Commission when we were talking about DCCs, so thank you.
I have one question of staff, and it's on the project lists, and I'm trying to square. I'm sure there's an obvious answer I'm not seeing. Project timing and priority. So specifically, there's just one example: the traffic signal for Rest Haven on Ardwell. It's showing as long for project timing, being over 10 years, but showing as a high priority is like a 1. So how do we square that in terms of getting things done, Ms. Clary?
Through to the chair, or to the chair. So priority is the likelihood is going to be needed in the future, and the timeline is when we expect it to be needed. With the traffic signals, that was a best estimate from staff based on some key traffic areas and our knowledge of current traffic flows in Sydney. So yeah, some things we know will be a high priority, but they won't be a high priority until 10 years or 20 years out. And other things may be a more near-term project, but if it didn't happen, it would be like a lower priority.
Great, perfect. That makes perfect sense. And I have second-time speaker, Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Chair. If you could bring up the slide, please, on the proposed DCC rates examples. It says proposed DCC rates. That's the title. Right there. Thank you. Earlier you mentioned about the challenge with low-density residential and the variation across different segments and different sectors. one of the biggest challenges Sydney has is we're 5 square kilometers, and most of our density is going to come up, but the cost of land slows that progress. So a lot of our homes are 3 and 4 bedroom homes with 1 or 2 people living in them, as you noted in your report. So if I'm an owner of a single family residence that has 2 of us in there, and we're going to say, okay, we're going to bring in our family, or we're going to multi-generational, or we're going to put a basement suite in. According to this, your low density residential rate, I have an initiation of at least $30,000 to start that project. Am I misreading that, or?
So through the chair, for the low density residential, it's per unit. It should also say kind of per lot there as well. So typically that's charged at time of subdivision most commonly.
Right.
So really what we're doing with the DCCs is trying to understand the cost for new growth. So if there is an existing low density single family home with 2 people in it, it is already a burden on the infrastructure. It has already been incorporated into the infrastructure. So if you were to create a renovation to support, having more space within your own home, you would not be paying a DCC rate for any existing building and development.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Getting back to the discussion we were having, I think the mayor we had been looking at the chart and how much our DCCs were, and we were talking about, well, the reason there's lots of DCCs is we have lots of projects that we want to get done. But I guess what I'm wondering is there set standards or formulas that you use to determine how much of each project is related to growth? And so when I looked at our growth projections, I think it was 1% or just over 1%. And so maybe over 20 years, I think that maybe amounts to around 3,000 or so more people. And so how do we figure that all out? That, a park that, improvements that we had planned to do in a park or sidewalks, there's things that we've decided to do already. How do we figure that out? And I guess, and along with that is that where, if we wanted to reduce our DCCs in any way, is there opportunity in looking at those percentages in terms of, if we decided we thought that growth was less responsible for the project than we initially anticipated?
Through the chair, that's a good question here. So what's not included on this slide is the methods for allocating benefit. So there's 3 kind of legislated tools for allocating benefit, which is really, studies and modeling. And so you can actually forecast the infrastructure capacity increase. So that's mainly in utilities. There is growth, as you've mentioned there. So really growth of the community or growth of a certain node in the community can be used to support identifying what the benefit will be, or a rule of thumb approach where you would determine a scale where you would essentially identify based on staff's knowledge what that benefit to growth would be. So in terms of reducing any of those percentages, for instance, the rule of thumb or scale, maybe there could be a discussion there, but we really wouldn't recommend the benefit allocation is more of the technical input, where we're really trying to understand based on development permitting approvals and discussions around where staff know that that's occurring versus where each of these projects is occurring. What is that linkage and connection between those two? Really where there is the space to kind of turn up support is really that municipal assist factor and lever. The benefit allocation is more of that technical input. And so there's quite some substantial going through each of those projects, mapping them out and assigning them to different areas of growth in order to determine that rate.
Just interrupt for a second. Ms. Clary has a comment.
Oh.
Thank you. Through to Councillor O'Keefe. Just to clarify, these were all developed based on inputs that most of them have been through council in one way or another, with the exception of the utility modeling, which was done strictly on a technical basis. But for example, like our parks program is fairly large, and that is based on park acquisition from our parks need assessment. So if we were looking to, if there was a desire to reduce DCCs, we could look at our level of service in the future, and if we wanted to provide a lower level of service in the future compared to what has already come forward to council. So the two large programs are parks and transportation, and as I identified in an email earlier today, the transportation DCC is largely based on the active transportation plan, and then the parks is based on the parks needs assessment. Those are the larger dollar value items for those.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I wasn't, I understand where that those were all approved. All that I was wondering is where the flexibility is. Not that we would not do those things, because as you say, those are things we all identified that we wanted to do, but just where the balance lies between what would be tax funded and what would be growth funded is kind of, yeah.
And maybe in addition to Ms. Clare's comment, I'll note that, where these programs are now, developed, there has been some really good, very recent infrastructure modeling to support them. This is where updating those programs is far less onerous. And so if growth doesn't occur, most communities in the province are in the position of not knowing whether growth will occur as it's been set forth. There's a lot of uncertainty on when and where growth will occur, whether the market will permit it. Just because there is the ability to build up to 4 units on any lot does not mean that the market will support for that to occur. So, there's really a recommendation here to watch what trends do occur, and then to update within 3 to 5 years. Given that the project lists have been created, this major update was the most onerous that will probably happen for years to come. Maintaining the list becomes much less onerous, and those growth inputs can be updated, with that amendment to the bylaw.
Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just try to summarize too what I think I'm hearing the question is. In terms of a possible scenario would be, let's say we needed to upgrade a pump station for drinking water, or maybe it should say wastewater, because we don't really have drinking water pump stations. In Sydney, it's so flat. And so let's say a wastewater pump station, for example, and the growth projection for a particular neighborhood was that there was going to be an additional 500 units, and therefore we need to upgrade that pump station to accommodate that volume of wastewater flow. We know that pump unit would cost, let's say, $750,000. We essentially know that there's already 1,000 people living there, so we would just turn that cost into a percentage and allocate the percentage of the current existing population as the municipal share, and then the benefiting factor would be the remainder, which is the development cost charge. The dial that you get to change or turn as council's prerogative is the assist factor. And so, but if you want to apply an assist factor, you have to apply it across the entire wastewater program, not just to that particular project.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Councillor Novak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to either staff or presenter. In the development of the rates for Sydney, I'm looking at the table that shows, just for example, I'll pick the first one, low density residential, 29,189. That's fine, but then when we look at the graph a bit further down, again for low density residential, the number is 30.4 thousand, and we've got some included regional DCCs. We've talked about a lot of these costs. We talked about roads, drainage, protective services. We haven't talked about regional DCCs. Could you give us a sense of what these are and how they come to fit into our DCC program?
Yes, through the chair. So the regional DCCs would be for the Saanich Peninsula wastewater, water and wastewater supply. So that would be through the Capital Regional District, and would be the charges that are that Sydney would be collecting for those regional DCCs for the CRD, Capital Regional District, for the distribution and service of that water and wastewater
So just
supply
those
to
two,
the
water and
peninsula.
wastewater. Okay, great, thank you.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, and thank you for the previous question. Just from the question, earlier question from Councillor Duck with regards to secondary suites, adding them, the DCC wouldn't apply because it's not considered growth, or the way we're defining our DCCs, those secondary suites wouldn't be added. But we have seen applications, and I see under the definition of low density, it says in line with SMU legislation. We are seeing some projects come forward where there are 3 separate residential units, or we can have up to 4 residential units on a single family lot. So if it's going from 1 to 3 or from 1 to 4, there would be DCCs charged on all 3 of those separate residences, or all 4 separate residences of the 30,400.
Through the chair, it would depend on what type of development is occurring, but yes, if it went from 1 to 4, there would be some DCCs being charged. So if you had a single family home, you would be able to build in, as of right, a secondary suite to that. That would be incorporated in what's considered the single family home. If you were to have a single family home that moves to a duplex, each of which have a secondary suite, you would be paying for that additional duplex unit on the per unit basis of a low density residential charge.
So I'm not making reference to secondary suites. I'm excluding secondary suites. So we had a recent application come forward. It needed a variance, otherwise it wouldn't have come to council. It was on Rest Haven, and there's currently a single family residence there, and there will be 3 separate residences there. So there's no secondary suites involved. There are 3 separate residences, and this is under SMU, allowing 3 residences on a single family lot of a certain size. So will DCCs be charged on 2 or 3 of those? Given that there's already a single family home there, will DCCs be charged on the 2 additional new units on the property?
And just for clarification, so this would be a triplex type of development essentially? So in the case of a triplex that was created in a single family home, in the theory of DCCs, you would be charging for 3 triplex units, and you would be crediting the single family home that already existed.
Okay, so thank you for the clarification. So low density is, in the reference to SMU, is only with regards to secondary suites. And in the cases where they're going to 3 units, sorry, in the case of that 3-unit building, it is going to be a triplex, but there can be situations where the residences aren't, where the 3 or 4 residences aren't joined on the property.
And by joined,
they're not attached.
It would still be 3 DCC charges.
Yeah. 3 addition, if there's a single family there and they went to 4, there'd be 3.
Before with the credit for the existing.
With credit for the existing. Okay. Thanks very much.
Councillor O'Keefe with a last question.
No, just when we're talking about regional DCCs, so I was wondering how things would work like with Panorama Rec Center. So that's our recreation facilities. If, Panorama Rec decided that we need a new swimming pool because there's lots more people coming here or whatever, does that get factored in here, or I'm just wondering how that all plays out.
Mr. Hisek?
That would be a regional district DCC if they were to go that route, and I don't know of any regional districts that have parks DCCs, and I don't think that would be even an allowable DCC charge.
So it doesn't impact our DC, they won't come to us and.
No,
okay.
no.
Mr. Hisek would like to weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's an example of a potential future ACC, but because it is a jointly shared facility with our neighbors, it requires a bit more investigation on how that might actually work as individual leviers of DCCs.
Okay.
And that's one of the many things we need to look at as we become familiar with ACC legislation.
Councillor Duck?
Yeah, I'm prepared to make the recommendation, move the recommendation.
If there's no other questions, please.
Okay. I so move that number 1, the staff proceed with stakeholder engagement with the development cost charge, amenity cost charge rates, and municipal assist factor presented in this report, And number 2, that staff explore DCC waivers and reductions and report back to council.
Second.
Have it moved and seconded. Any further comments? Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I'm in favor of this moving forward, for now. I still have some concerns about the rates. I'm concerned about, so for example, and I understand the rationale, but I'm concerned about, how we're divvying up the costs of the DCCs. And so in relation to our housing policy, concerned about, we're trying to attract young families to Sydney who traditionally are looking at probably medium density type of residences. So I worry about increasing the barrier for them to buy into here when they're struggling to get a down payment. They still have to pay property transfer tax, mortgage insurance, and then the burden that this puts on them. So that's kind of rolling around in my head in terms of, is there a way to make things more equitable for them? And I guess it would mean redistributing that burden. Having said that, I'm interested to see, I don't know enough about this to propose something, an alternative. So I'm happy to see it go forward and hear what the community has to say. So thank you.
Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you, Chair. And first, thank you to Urban Systems and to staff for all the work that's gone behind DCCs. There's a lot of work just looking at the project scope and detail over 20 years, and then coming up with the benefits factor and all the rest. Appreciate that. I just have a question on process with regards to the first part of the recommendation with stakeholder engagement. And so that my question through to staff is, will that stakeholder engagement happen in the fall, and then staff will come back to council after the engagement prior to drafting a DCC bylaw to come forward?
The intent was to move into stakeholder engagement once this is adopted at council, ratified at council next week. So we would do the stakeholder engagement, which is largely the development community, which may not be on vacation the same way that the general populace is. So move into it right away. And we would bring back the bylaw for first, second, and third reading, potentially as early as the August meeting, but more likely probably the first September meeting. And then it would go to the province for approval. And as long as they approve it, it would then come back to council for adoption.
Okay, I appreciate staff's consideration of the timing of engagement, and developers may not be on the same vacation. Certainly developers who have projects underway, but developers who don't necessarily have projects underway may not, may be away. It is the most popular vacation time of the year, but this timing is partly considered that this would be the process in terms of it also after first and second readings with a bylaw before council, it going to the province, that this would be when we would expect to hear back from the province. This would be able to be in place for 2026 or effective 2026.
Yes, so through the chair, once the bylaw is adopted by council, it typically spends a little bit of time in the ministry. We've noticed that the review times can take a little bit longer these days, just with all the updates. And then once it comes back, if everything is vetted by the province and considered okay, the minute that we're able to get in front of council for fourth and final reading, that would be the date that the new DCC bylaw would be applicable. The 12-month grace period would still be in play for any developers that had in-stream applications, though.
Thank you. And if staff could comment on the second part of the recommendation, exploring the DCC waivers and reductions, that would come back to council at the time of the bylaws came back, or?
No, that would come back at a future time. At this time, I can't comment on how quickly we'd be able to get it back, but it would definitely be, if there was a project in stream that may be eligible for a potential waiver, we would definitely make sure it comes back before then.
Okay, thank you. And if staff, there's indications, I think, in both the report and in the staff report, the consultant report and the staff report, in terms of reviewing DCCs in the future every 3 to 5 years, I think it indicates. Are staff kind of keeping, through you, Chair, are staff kind of keeping that as a window of 3 to 5 years based on the experience of us implementing them, or do staff see us not coming back to this for 5 years?
Through the chair, we believe that a 5-year interval for the next major update would be appropriate, considering we're essentially just implementing. I don't consider this a replacement of what we have. I think it's a full new implementation, and it is very labor intensive, and we'll be chipping away at it, but I don't see another iteration for up to 5 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments? Councillor O'Keefe.
Just in regards to the engagement bit, in your experience, when you go out to development community, are we looking for them to provide input in things they want changed? Or is it more, here's what we're doing, we're just letting you know that this is happening? So would there be a process where they would give feedback and potentially what we've proposed might change, and that would come back to council to say, this is what the development community is saying? I'm just wondering how that whole process.
Through the chair, in our experience, it does function quite well when we really approach the development community with open ears and the intention to listen and to take in that feedback. We do get much of the same feedback typically, which is that people don't want DCCs to increase from the development community, which is not a surprise. However, where we are really cognizant is if there are areas where pro formas are not going to be viable and there is a clear rationale or examples or feedback that's provided on where there are real challenges in making pro formas for development work based on the new rates, we do want to know that. We do want to bring that feedback back in a meaningful way.
Okay, so that would come back to council when the draft bylaw is presented, and yeah, okay,
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose a motion arising or make a motion arising, and if there's a seconder to motivate. And the motion is that staff report back on the future of the RCMP detachment building and options for a police DCC.
A second for discussion.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So appreciating Councillor O'Toole did raise the question with regards to Protective Service DCC. Appreciate the information in the staff report regarding fire service and police service. And but we're in a situation where the RCMP detachment approximately 15 or 17 years ago did basically undergo an expansion in terms of taking over a significant portion of the courthouse building. So 15 or 17 years has passed, and our community is continuing to grow. And so while I do appreciate that staff didn't want to postpone this process at this time any further to perhaps pursue information that might have led to a police DCC, that I think we should be proactive and think of, we're thinking 20 and 30 years out. Our community is continuing to grow. North Saanich is continuing to grow. It's a two-municipality detachment. And I think we should start the process now of considering what the future of the building is. I think in working with the RCMP, certainly not just our detachment, we're going to have to work with the whether it's E-Division or whichever part of the RCMP to start to consider it. I just go from the experience at CRD. CRD is considering being involved in supporting the 5 West Shore municipalities in a new RCMP detachment. It's presently costed $103 million, and there's a process for that project to go forward. That process has been in the works for a number of years, and will still take time for it to come forward. So certainly there's the analysis to begin with, and I think that should start. I'm not going to put a time that staff report back, or suggest a time that staff report back, but I would prefer not to wait 5 years from now to consider a police DCC and start the process sometime in the near, closer future.
Councillor Rinto?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I support the motion. I think it's an element that we've seen through our budget cycles, sort of constant evolution required of protective services, frankly, be it fire service or police service, with regard to, you know, growth and the evolving nature of what we're required to do with infrastructure and make constant improvements. We've certainly seen that with the RCMP detachment, and I hope that this is perhaps just a stepping stone towards looking further and more comprehensively at adding fire service to DCC as well. I'll support the motion. Thank you.
And Councillor Duck?
Yeah, I'll support this motion. Certainly, where both communities are approaching that threshold where RCMP services will need to be elevated significantly, both in costs and services. So we will need better capital protection and buildings for that. So yeah, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries unanimously.
Point of order.
Councillor Duck?
I'd like to suggest a 5-minute recess.
Sure. We'll reconvene at 8:31-ish.
Yeah, I was getting to my limit.
Okay, we'll reconvene the meeting at 8:33, and moving on to item 8B, the update on the establishment of an extreme cold weather response shelter, and we have a report from Chief Mickelson.
Good evening, Council. This report provides an update on progress made to establish an extreme weather response shelter in Sydney. As the report details, there are outstanding tasks to complete, and opening an extreme weather response shelter this winter is definitely not a certainty. That said, we have made excellent progress with Beacon Community Services and are working diligently to put all the required pieces in place. One of those pieces is an OCP and zoning bylaw amendment for 9924 3rd Street to add emergency sheltering as a permitted use. Our recommendation is that Council direct staff to prepare an OCP and zoning bylaw amendment for 9924 3rd Street, Wakefield Manor, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Open the floor to committee members. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Chair, through you to staff. Maybe perhaps Mr. Edwards, because it's more a zoning and OCP question. So in communication with staff, my understanding is that if council could choose to word the OCP in such a way that in the event that we decided we wanted to open up another shelter, or say this current shelter didn't work out, we needed to go to another shelter, that we could word the OCP in such a way, sort of more broadly, rather than making it specific to the address at 3rd Street, so that we would save ourselves some time in the future and give us flexibility in terms of, setting up, say, another location or alternate location. And that our capacity to kind of control that would be in the zoning bylaw, where we could allow for temporary use permits in the town for emergency shelter. So, and I think that that's the process that City of Victoria uses. So just wanting to clarify that I've understood that correctly.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor O'Keefe, I'm not exactly certain about the City of Victoria's zoning, but I do know that they have allowed for shelter space in all zones through their OCP, but I'm not sure if it's all zones are actually zoned for it. But that is an option for council to consider. Staff at this time haven't really contemplated the idea of amending the OCP in that very broad, all-encompassing way. Staff have been focused more on site-specific options and worked closely with the property owners that are very open and keen to work with us in this type of service. If council were to choose to go to that more broad application, that is definitely a way that you can streamline things for alternative locations. And the temporary use permit approach is quite an effective way without then having to rezone all of the properties for that use. So essentially the way it would work is we would have to amend the OCP to allow for shelter use in all zones, but then when an application for a specific property came forward, if it wasn't already zoned appropriately, rather than going forward with a full rezoning, we would approach it with a temporary use permit, which is a less onerous process, and it is less onerous because it's temporary in nature, essentially testing out the use. And you only get one extension, so the temporary use permit is approved for a 3-year term and then can be extended for an additional 3 years. During that additional 3 years is typically when a project or a property would be seeking full rezoning. So it is an entirely feasible approach. I've used TUPs in the past myself at previous municipalities, and it's a quite effective tool. But I do want to highlight that, staff have not contemplated the broad application of shelter space across the entire town. At this point, we've really just focused in on this one location.
Okay, thank you.
Other committee members with questions? No. I have one for staff, if I may. Just in terms of the 9924 on 3rd Street, the Wakefield, has there been a process that to consult with the actual residents who live in the building?
Through the chair, yes. We made sure that prior to this going public that Beacon Community Services was to communicate with the residents in the building that this was going to happen. That was part of the the lead up to this happening.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Novick?
Prepared to read in the recommendation?
This one?
We'll know the existing one, and then we'll go to yours. Or is that going to substitute?
No, yeah.
Yeah, what?
We were going to do this instead.
Councillors?
All right. I'll pass this. I'll leave it.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Okay, thank you. I'll propose an alternative motion that staff prepare an OCP amendment that allows for emergency shelters in locations throughout the town, and that the zoning bylaw be amended to allow emergency shelters as a temporary use in locations throughout the town.
I'll second that.
Councillor O'Keefe, you wish to motivate?
Sure. So rationale for this is, as staff have identified in the report, it can take a long time to go through an OCP amendment, a zoning bylaw amendment, in order to get an emergency shelter in place. And so what I'm proposing is that in the event that this particular location didn't work out, or we needed to set up another location, we've at least set the table, made it easier for us to be flexible in terms of being able to move forward with setting up emergency shelters in the future. The motion as it was is very specific to 9924 3rd Street. So if for some reason, as I say, that didn't work out, then we're kind of back to square one again and having to go through, look for another location, do another OCP amendment, another zoning bylaw. So I think this gives us more flexibility and makes it easier for us and the staff to move forward with these things in the future.
Seconder, Councillor Novick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with my colleague. I think if we're going to go through the trouble of making an OCP amendment, it makes sense to amend the OCP so that this use can occur wherever it's necessary. I don't believe it makes sense to amend the OCP strictly for a single location. The OCP is a large-scale document. It's a broad-based document, whereas zoning is a tool for a specific location. So if we're going to modify the OCP, it should allow this use wherever it's necessary. And as Mr. Edwards stated, the use of a temporary use permit is a perfectly good tool to allow for emergency shelters on a trial basis, or until we know whether or not A, we're going to require it for the long term, and B, whether or not the proponent or the location that we've chosen is suitable for the long term. So I think that Councillor O'Keefe's motion covers all eventualities for the foreseeable future. And it makes, to my mind, it makes a little more sense than the rather narrowly focused recommendation that is currently there. So I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I won't support the motion. you know, I think I haven't been completely supportive of where we're at with this process, to be clear, and part of that rationale is just, you know, needs-based and based on the processes that we're currently in place versus where we are moving to with respect to this recommendation. And so I'm happy to see a single location identified because of the broad implications it has for the community. And so it gives us an opportunity to, as we move through the process and the OCP and zoning bylaw amendment, to have that dialogue, not only with Wakefield Manors residents and hear from them, but also from immediate adjacent neighbors, to suggest that we should just put a blanket change in the entire community and have it open for temporary use permit for a shelter is a completely different consultation process in my mind, and probably one that stands the chance of having a lot of anxiety created in the broader community. So I don't intend to support the motion that's on the floor. Thank you.
Mayor McKinsmith.
Thank you, Chair. And first question through to staff. If staff could read back the wording of the motion, please.
I would actually request that Councillor O'Keefe read it first, please. I
Councillor,
think I missed the end of it.
If you could read it just a little more slowly. Sure.
Microphone, Councillor O'Keefe.
Sure, so the amended, or the motion was that staff prepare an OCP amendment that allows for emergency shelters in locations throughout the town, and that the zoning bylaw be amended to allow emergency shelters as a temporary use in locations throughout the town.
Thank you. So there's two components to this, and I'll comment on them both, or comment on both of them. Throughout the town, sorry, I have another question before commenting on the two parts to it, and that is, in the staff report under communication and public engagements, the staff will bring forward the draft bylaws together with additional information on community engagement to a future council meeting. So we know that if we're doing an OCP or a zoning amendment, we're required to have a public engagement process, which will include a public hearing. Is our staff contemplating at this time that there would be any other engagement other than what's associated with a public hearing process?
Ms. Verhagen.
Thank you. Through the chair, an OCP amendment, as part of amending the OCP, a municipality must consider what other agencies and groups it would consult with at the beginning of that OCP amendment process. That could include other neighboring municipalities, the school district, the capital regional district, etc. That's all outlined in legislation. So there is that additional consultation step, as well as a public hearing later in the OCP process.
Thank you for that. A follow-up is that then engagement with the neighborhood residents of the building. Well, we've heard from staff that Beacon, to this point, because it's only coming forward to council now, but to this point, Beacon Community Services has been the one. That's our understanding that they're the one to have conducted engagement with the residents of Wakefield Manor. So, apart from the public hearing process that would be associated with us making an amendment to the OCP, we wouldn't be doing any other engagement. We would leave the engagement to that public hearing process.
Again, through the chair, the council or the staff recommendation to make an OCP and zoning amendment, or OCP, and zoning amendment for the specific property, that process would see us sending a notice of new application to the 100-meter radius and to this property. If we're amending the OCP broadly to apply to all properties in Sydney, we're not sending a notice to every property in Sydney. We would use other methods of communication to get the word out that this change is being proposed. It wouldn't be a direct notification to properties around this address on 3rd Street, because it would be for the whole town.
Thank you.
And if I may just
Mr.
add to, yeah, we're working closely with Beacon Community Services, and we would rely on them to engage more directly with the residents in the building and their immediate neighbors, as well as the mail out and the standard engagement.
Thank you. So now I'll comment on the motion, or the two parts to the motion. I'm not supportive of this alternate recommendation. I think the process that will transpire for this particular location, I think, is a good one with regards to the engagement that will occur. And we've just heard from staff that the engagement will not be the same necessarily if we do a municipality-wide amendment to zoning. The other reason is that this is very unique, the consideration of a shelter. The supposition that, you know, we may have a second shelter, or we may have to find a different location if this one doesn't work out. Yes, there's a process for amending the OCP and the zoning bylaw. It doesn't take an inordinate amount of time. It takes a long time if you're going to do a comprehensive review of your OCP, but if you're making an amendment to the OCP on something very specific, it's not nearly as elaborate. And with regards to the second part, in terms of amending the zoning bylaw with regards to TUP, I don't know if that's actually necessary, or if staff are actually suggesting that because it would be considered part and parcel of if it was throughout the town. If staff might comment on that.
Yeah, thank you. The zoning bylaw doesn't currently include any temporary permitted uses. Like, if a use is permitted by the zoning bylaw, it's either permitted outright or permitted with conditions. And some uses have conditions attached, say a motel or a hotel has a maximum length of stay, but that use is permitted all year. So there may be a potential to include a condition on an emergency shelter with a condition of use being a maximum time that it's open, but we would have to look into that. That's not something we've done any research on so far. So normally, our current OCP has designated areas where temporary use permits are permitted. They're currently something that can be applied for in the industrial area or in the downtown commercial area. There's a process for a temporary use permit. It's part of our land use procedures bylaw, number 1380. The process is outlined in that. And the OCP is what designates where we can do temporary use permits. The OCP doesn't currently say you can get a temporary use permit for somewhere in the multi-unit residential lands, which is where this property on 3rd Street is. So that's why we would have to amend the OCP to even allow a temporary use permit on the multi-unit residential lands. So there's a few different things going on there.
Thank you, through the chair to staff for that. So I'm not supportive. I wouldn't want to communicate to the community at large that we are doing OCP amendment and zoning amendment to consider the possibility of a shelter anywhere in the community. That's just not something I'm prepared to communicate. While there would be, for the communication, engagement at the time we were considering an alternate location, I think, quite frankly, it's too broad, and I think the staff recommendations serves our purpose as well. And allows us to move forward. Thank you.
Councillor Duck?
Yeah, equally, I won't be supporting this current motion because I think this is we're starting a trial run here, so it had the consequences and the possibilities, and we just need to get our systems in place before we start looking for a broader approach. I think this is a test case, and we should see how it goes. And if it goes well, then yeah, we can maybe look at something like this down the road we see how it goes. If it doesn't, then we're in a position where we've managed the process rather than just putting the blanket application up there. So I will not be supporting this as it stands. Thank you.
Councillor Duncan, would you like to weigh in?
I have nothing to add, but I won't be supporting it for similar reasons. Anywhere through town could possibly include residential zones, and so I feel as it's worded, it's simply too broad for the type of thing that might be included. Thanks.
Any second time speakers? Councillor Novick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think the question of emergency warming shelters is going to go away anytime soon. It keeps coming back to us. It's something that we can't ignore. We have to go through a process to allow this in the town, and that process involves changing the OCP or amending the OCP and amending the zoning bylaw. As Ms. Verhagen said, it's a fairly extensive process. I think the cost of going through an OCP amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment is substantially high, and the consequences of the initial location, and in my experience, certainly not with warming shelters, but and sometimes choosing a provider for a particular service, it's not uncommon for that initial provider not to work out for one reason or another. We certainly have no guarantee that it's going to work out over the long term. At best, we may get 1 year out of it. At worst, maybe not even a full year. I think that if we're going to go through a process of amending the OCP and amending the zoning bylaw, that we should at the very least give ourselves the latitude that if this initial attempt at creating a warming shelter doesn't work out with the chosen supplier, that we can then go back to looking for a new supplier without having to think about, oh my God, we've got to go through an entire OCP amendment again, and we have to go through an entire zoning bylaw amendment again. This takes up valuable staff time. It takes up valuable resource time. It takes up money. And I think once we're going to go ahead with this warming shelter, and it's something that has been approved by council, that we look into it. So there's obviously some consensus on the fact that we need this in town, and the need is not going to go away. So I don't see why we're prepared, or some of us are prepared, to go for a fairly narrowly defined series of amendments that could prove to be worthless within the first 12 months if Wakefield Manor, for some reason, doesn't work out. And that is certainly a probability. I think it makes sense. Now, perhaps the wording might need to be fine-tuned or wordsmithed a bit to address some of the concerns that councillors have brought up. But I think that we need to at least give ourselves the latitude to be able to follow through with this process, even if the initial supplier does not work. So I still think that this makes more sense than a narrowly defined series of OCP and bylaw amendments. So I will support the motion. Thank you.
Nobody else? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Rintoul, Councillor Duck, Councillor Duncan, Mayor McNeil-Smith, and myself opposed. Motion's defeated. So, Councillor Duck, would you like to move it all?
Yes, I'd like to move the initial recommendation that staff be directed to prepare OCP and zoning bylaw amendments to allow for an emergency shelter use at 9924 3rd Street, Wakefield Manor.
Second.
Would you like to motivate, Councillor Duck?
I think we're good to go.
Councillor Duncan, anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Mayor McNeil-Smith?
Thank you. No motivation. I think our previous discussion was the motivation. I just want to take this moment that we may have members in the audience who are nearby residents or residents associated with Wakefield Manor. In terms of our process, you've heard the discussion this evening from council and questions through to staff with regards to the engagement that would take place in this process. But tonight, council is meeting as committee of the whole. We are making this recommendation, if this proceeds, to council, and council will meet next Monday night, and we will be considering the recommendation again. And if you were here at the beginning of the evening, we do have a public participation period at the beginning of the meeting, where residents can speak on a topic on the agenda, so you have that opportunity. And also, residents have the opportunity anywhere in the process to forward a letter of correspondence that could go to admin@sydney.ca. That would come onto the council agenda, and all council members would read that correspondence that was provided in writing, either dropped off or sent by email prior to the meeting. So just noticing that there are members of the community in attendance, I wanted to mention that. We could certainly answer any questions after the meeting.
Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, next on our agenda, item 8C, proposed amendments to the animal license and control bylaw. Introduce a report. Ms. Clary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The CRD is working to standardize animal control bylaws throughout the region. Ms. Henderson is actually here from the CRD Animal Control if you do have questions after this introduction. The bylaw amendment is largely driven by the desire for that standardization. Some key changes are around aggressive and dangerous dogs, and also the fees associated with all animal impoundment and bylaw infractions. This amendment also includes item 4.1.1K, which would prohibit dogs from certain purpose-built facilities, including sport courts, which addresses a previous council resolution and is also discussed in the next staff report. This also builds in the option, which is a town-led suggestion. However, I understand the CRD has dealt with this in other municipalities as well, but it provides the option for the Director of Engineering to establish off-leash dog areas through signage. This would obviously be done after community engagement and consultation on that change, but it would mean that we wouldn't have to bring back a bylaw amendment anytime we were to establish an off-leash dog area. As mentioned, Ms. Henderson and I are here to answer any questions you may have on this bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. And before we go to any questions, I will invite a member of council or a member of the committee to invite Coral Henderson from Animal Control to answer questions.
So moved.
By Ms. Smith, seconded by Councillor Rintoul. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. So we'll go to committee members. Do we have any questions for staff or for Ms. Henderson? Oh, okay. You guys all at the same time. Mayor McGill-Smith.
Thank you, and my question is actually to the CRD rep. Thank you for attending this evening. And the question is we see the definitions that the town is incorporating, and we see these definitions are taken from CRD a bylaw. Are you able to speak to how long those particular definitions have been in place? Have there been changes to those definitions in recent years?
Thank you. The CRD is developing a animal responsibility bylaw that's been in development for most of the year. So with that, we've been working with other municipalities who are a little bit quicker than we are to implement. Some of these definitions are already in the District of Saanach's animal control bylaw, and the CRD took over animal services in 2022. And with that, we've been piloting the aggressive and dangerous, and we've had great success with that. Noticing where a lot of our bylaws are lacking, so why we are trying to do a more regional approach and standardizing it across, because in one area we can do things with aggressive dogs, in other areas we can't. And we're running into a lot of problems with that because the number of dogs have increased since COVID, probably 4 times as many, and we're running into more problems of uncontrolled dogs. There's also the Bylaw Officers Association for BC. They are working on a provincial animal control bylaw, which we are on the council for, and our committee, and these are the definitions that are in there. One we did omit was vicious, because we don't deal like other places with such like animals that would kill somebody. So we're not in like putting those into our bylaws, because the dangerous dog under the community charter covers enough.
Thank you. A follow-up, if I may, Chair, is thank you for that. And I should perhaps know, as a CRD representative, the CRD bylaw would be applicable to the 3 electoral areas.
Correct.
Whereas the municipal bylaws would be in effect in the 13 municipalities.
Right.
Is the bylaw that CRD is working on that would be in effect in the electoral areas considered as a, what's the term used, a model bylaw?
A template, yes.
A template bylaw?
Absolutely. So the CRD is moving towards the more of an animal responsibility bylaw. As the bylaws were created, they're mostly there to govern dogs, right? So now cats and other animals have been coming into play, and then other issues with dogs. So to have that approach, the animal responsibility bylaw moves the kind of the punishment from the animal to the owner. So the onus is on the owner to be responsible pet owner, instead of the old bylaws model it where if your dog is dangerous, they automatically are put on death row, basically, which is not something that happens anymore. Provincial court will never give you a destruction order unless it's literally somebody's life at stake. So consent orders or things like that come into play. So the responsibility bylaw is something that the CRD wants to look into as also forming maybe a sub-regional service, where then this type of model bylaw would go for all of the areas that the CRD covers. So then it's the same across the board. Right now, like you said, there's 14 different bylaws. Unfortunately, none are the same. So we're trying to make them that way, as well as if your dog is declared dangerous in Sydney, it doesn't apply in Central Saanich. So it's like you can move to Central Saanich and it's gray, right? Where the new bylaw, there's a section that states it is for the totality of the CRD.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that we're moving on that path, and that staff have taken the approach to do this in consultation with CRD. Thank you.
Councillor Novak?
Thank you. Through you to, I'm sorry, I don't know your title.
Coral.
Coral. I'm curious as to one of the definitions, and that is guide dog. And I haven't read the entire Animal Act. I assume that there's some provision for guide dogs, but I'm curious as to why we're only looking at the term guide dog and not service dog, since service dogs have become a lot more prevalent these days, and there is a Guide Dog and Service Dog Act. So
Correct.
Why are guide dogs singled out without the inclusion of service dogs?
Thank you. We did a lot of research on bylaws that include or don't include guide dogs and service dogs. There's actually quite a few that don't even include it. The point of having that in the bylaw is a guide dog for somebody who is blind. They don't have to pick up feces. They're not going to be fined for that. Whether or not they're allowed anywhere is under the Act. It has nothing to do with the animal control bylaw. And also it eliminates the fee for a dog license for them. If we open that up to service dogs as well, then everybody has a service dog. How do we regulate that? Because now the province used to give you a card that stated you had a registered service dog. You don't need that anymore to be able to get the same type of access to places with your service animal. So the animal control bylaw, just when it applies to guide dogs, is just omitting certain things. Obviously someone who is blind may not be able to pick up feces, and they need it to sustain like life activities, and so they don't have to pay for a dog license. We noticed that a lot of places discussed and put into reports not to add the service dogs, because then you're looking at dog licensing, and revenue with that is everybody can get a form that states their dog is a service dog from some end, and we can't ask for doctor's notes or anything like that. So how do we manage that, and how do we go through with that? The animal control bylaw doesn't prohibit service dogs from doing anything. So it's just the feces.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rinto?
Thank you, Chair. Two-part question, if I may be so permitted, Chair.
You may.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Henderson, for sticking around to near the finish line to
Best
have
for
this
last.
conversation. Agreed. Thank you. We've included in this amendment a reference to habitually noisy dog. Is that something that came in consultation with your office?
Thank you, great question. So barking bylaws in most of the municipalities is very general. So a dog must not disturb the peace and enjoyment of the neighborhood or vicinities or people within the vicinity. It's very open for a lot of neighborly disputes. That noise bugs me. So that is a bylaw infraction, the way the bylaw speaks now. So when you deal with a barking dog, I've dealt with one, so I know. Habitually noisy dog is a dog that barks in excess of 10 minutes. And we changed it. It was 10 times in 30 days. And I'm like, that's a bit excessive. Someone has to listen to 100 minutes of barking 3 times in a 7-day period. And that's just evidence that it's the onus on the person who's complaining, because otherwise people are coming in and saying, the dog's barking, it's bugging me. And they expect enforcement. But we can't enforce that, because if someone disputes a ticket, we don't have anything, no evidence to show that that was a disturbance other than their word against the other person's word. So we don't notice that infraction ourselves, because we don't live in the vicinity, right?
So sorry, how would the complainant evidence that this animal meets the criteria identified here as a habitual noisy dog?
A recording of some kind. Everybody has a smartphone. If that was something that somebody couldn't do, we'd allow them something that we have recording devices, those little devices you can use in meetings and such. It has been already piloted in a few municipalities already. It has eliminated probably 50% of the barking complaints. And I can tell you from history, a lot of the barking complaints are neighborly disputes. If you dig down, it's the fence was in the wrong spot, their kids are loud. Now I want to complain about the barking because they complained about my parking. And it's not the dog that suffers in the end, because then the dog has got to put a shock collar on or something like that, which isn't recommended, but sometimes, you know, what are they going to do? They're not going to get rid of their dog. And to curb it, you have a hound dog, it's not going to be like, good boy, stop barking, it's not happening. So the habitually noisy dog, it gives us enough evidence to move forward that it's a legitimate complaint.
Yeah, okay. I struggled with this one in part because the only resolution here is a fine, and seemingly that fine is destined to multiply. Is it a problem? Is it a challenge? Let's say in Sydney, because that's what this bylaw is related to.
We do get quite a few barking complaints in Sydney, but I could tell you what happens is we get the initial complaint and we explain the bylaw, and we go and talk to the person and let them know that there's been a complaint and this is the bylaw. So if somebody does have that many minutes of recording, we may come back with a fine. But we work with them and provide education. We loan out bark limiters, which are like little bird houses you can put outside, and if a dog barks, it makes a noise that it breaks their habit. It's basically hyper-focusing when dogs are habitually barking, and a noise of some kind, not loud to us, thank goodness, but to them will break it, and they're kind of like, oh, what's going on? So we have been piloting that for 2 years now, and our barking complaints have gone down by about 60%. And any of the ones that are actually legitimate barking complaints where the person just does not care, then they get a fine, but that usually stops the problem, because then, okay, I'll use the bark limiter, you know, or something like that. And we suggested even for people with, you know, they have neighbors that won't listen or comply, you can put a bark limiter on your property as well. I have one for my neighbor's dog. Their dog is just, it doesn't stop and they won't listen. Not much I can do, even though I work here. And the dog barks and it's quiet. So we give them a lot of education before a ticket. I can tell you now, I haven't written a ticket for barking in the entire year for any municipality.
Thanks. Well, that's helpful that you're taking an education
Absolutely.
first approach. I appreciate that. My concern was that, as you noted, that it might just be more of a problem between neighbors and the dog's caught in the middle. So I'm pleased to hear your response to that. The other one I think is from Ms. Clary, and that's with respect to 4.6B as in Bravo, with regard to the Director of Engineering being able to designate an off-leash area. My question is, would we be doing the Director of Engineering a favor? Because I highly doubt it.
Through to Councillor Rintoul, I don't think any Director of Engineering would just go designate an area without substantial community engagement or direction of council to do so. This is really just to allow a staff member to delegate the authority to a staff member to actually delegate an area as an off-leash dog area if all the other checks and balances are already done, rather than having to come back and amend the bylaw to specifically identify a park or an area in the actual bylaw.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your good judgment and how you would move forward with this. I'm a little hesitant with respect to that aspect of the bylaw, but I'll yield to see what my colleagues think of that. I'll pause there. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Duck?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Anderson, for your information. You mentioned about, currently, like, if you have a dangerous dog in Sydney, you can move to Central Saanich and no problems exist. Will this bylaw, uniformity of bylaw across the CRD also extend to prohibited animals? So, for example, I know that there's some consideration right now in the province relative to cats that are not house cats, but are more hunter cats. I don't know what the classification is. So will this bylaw direction help control prohibited animals as well?
Yes, you can put something in your bylaw like exotic animals, but if it's put into BC legislation, it doesn't have to be in your animal control bylaw. And they're talking about servals and such, and we do have a lot of those, and people don't realize how many we have. A lot in the CRD area, actually. And we just had another big issue recently where the SPCA seized a whole bunch. But I have seen myself loose servals and the damage that they can do, not good. So if it is under provincial law, they add it into the controlled species, I think, or alien species, then we don't have to put it in our animal control bylaw, they're just banned.
But to that extension, if it's not in the BC provincial bylaw, will we have something within the CRD, for example, for serval cats?
Absolutely, that's already been discussed at the board level, and if that doesn't go through in time, we'll add it to the bylaw, and then it's just in there.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Sorry, just going back to that section 4.6, through you to staff again. And I'm just seeking clarity on the 4.6B, and the Director of Engineering. So am I understanding that you would have the authority to, if there's a certain area that you think would be a good place for an off-leash area, that you could designate that area without coming to council, or what? Yeah. Is that, so in other words, if we pass this as it is, does it make the next item on the agenda a moot point?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, I think any director of engineering would still come and get support from council to add a new dog area. It would have budget implications, so it would require a budget item. We would likely want some community engagement on it, unless it was specifically in a future Parks Master Plan or something. If a future Parks Master Plan specifically identified a very certain area and there's a lot of community support from it, then a budget item may come forward, and then the Director of Engineering would have the authority to put signs up and identify that as an off-leash dog area. However, this isn't something that would just happen. It's in many of our other bylaws, there's certain items delegated to staff as well, where we wouldn't typically actually do it without sufficient community engagement or a budget item to actually facilitate the change that is being said.
Okay, that's reassuring. However, I'm wondering if that's all gonna happen anyways, why would we even put this in here? Well, like, I'm just trying to understand the rationale for having it if you would go through that process anyhow.
Right, so if this wasn't in here, and if council were to decide to move forward with an off-leash dog area in Iroquois Park in 2026, we would have to come back and amend the animal control bylaw to actually allow that off-leash dog area, because in our animal control bylaw as it reads now, it is only Peter Grant Park is the only off-leash dog area in Sydney. So we would have to come back and amend the bylaw anytime we were to add any sort of off-leash dog area in Sydney, which is okay if that was council's direction. However, it does simplify it by delegating that authority to staff and acknowledging that staff will go through the proper procedures in the future, because I don't think anyone would want to go and install a dog park without following those proper procedures because of the community blowback that may come from it, right? So.
Right, okay, thanks for the clarity.
Councillor Duck, you'd like to move the motion?
Yes, I would. I'd like to move the recommendation that the proposed bylaws to amend the animal license and control bylaw, municipal ticket information bylaw, and the bylaw enforcement notice bylaw be brought forward to council for consideration.
Moved by Councillor Duck, seconded by Councillor Novak. Would you like to motivate? Seconder, motivate? Councillor Rintoul?
Sorry, Chair, just a housekeeping matter. I just noticed that we were speaking of 4.6B. The next bullet there is 4.6F. So there might just be a housekeeping, unless I'm missing something here. There might be either something missing from the document or it just needs to be revised, that's all.
Ms. Clary?
So the F follows the E above 4.6.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're over 3 hours. Thank you, Ms. Clary.
Yeah.
That worked too.
Anyone else? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries unanimously. Move next to, thank you, Ms. Henderson. Move next to 8D, dogs in sports courts, and another report from Ms. Clary.
Thank you. This report addresses the council resolution related to dogs in sports courts that was passed earlier this year. The bylaw amendment that was just forwarded to council for first readings addresses the situation. Although the bylaw amendment is relatively easy, changing habits and enforcing these can be more challenging. Staff are therefore also recommending that a fully fenced off-leash dog area be considered as part of the 2026 budget deliberations. This would be a small fully fenced enclosed area in Iroquois Park. We plan on having like a small dog area and a large dog area, a larger dog area, and it would be about the same size as the existing sport court, the tennis courts in Iroquois Park. A picture of an existing area like this, similar size, square footage sized, located in Vancouver's Olympic Village, is included in this report for information. It has nice trees and benches and different things inside of it. Although this isn't a large enough area for like a dog run, let's say, for larger dogs, where people may still have to go to Peter Grant Park or Scihampton Park in North Saanich. It would meet some of the needs of the current people who are using the tennis courts as that function. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Committee members have any questions for staff? Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and through yourself, under communication and public engagement, it indicates the processes that will happen. Can staff comment on when that would occur, understanding that if this motion, if a recommendation, the staff recommendation or motion were to proceed, that it would be coming back to council in the 2026 capital budgeting process next February, March. But when would this engagement described to occur?
Through to Mayor McNeil-Smith, obviously it depends on resources, but I would expect it to be able to occur this fall, so that it would be available for the budget deliberations.
Great, thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, through you to staff. I remember when we went through this before, we had discussion about there's certain standards, I don't know if it's the American Kennel Club or SPCA or somebody, in terms of appropriate amount of space for small dogs and big dogs. So how does the space that's proposed align with those specifications?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, I haven't re-looked at those since we last discussed it related to Rest Haven Park, but I can confidently say it's smaller than what was proposed at Rest Haven Park, and therefore smaller than like an appropriate sized off-leash dog park, which is why in the council, in the report, we're calling it an off-leash dog area or enclosure. It shouldn't be considered a park where you can go and throw your ball a long distance for larger dogs. Those dogs and dog owners will still have to go to the larger facilities available to them. These are more areas where maybe someone's out for a morning walk with their dog. They want to socialize their dog a little bit. They want to socialize themselves, actually. Like I find this sort of enclosure is a good spot for community members to actually meet each other. And so that's really what's envisioned. It's not going to meet the requirements of a large dog run, off-leash dog park area.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Duck.
Yeah, I'm prepared to make the motion.
I have one question first, actually. Thank you, though. As staff, I could comment on, having gone down and looked at it, trying to picture it in my mind. I'm assuming the plan would be to try and place it in there so that the trees that are presently there would not be interrupted or damaged in any way.
Yes, that would be the intent.
Great, thank you. Perfect motion. Councillor Duck.
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendation that an off-leash dog area be considered for Iroquois Park as part of the 2026 budget deliberations.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Duck, second by Councillor Novak. Care to motivate?
Yeah, I think this is kudos to staff. I think it's a great solution for a problem we had in that area. It's a great use of the area and an opportunity, as staff have indicated, for dog walkers in that area to socialize their dogs in an area. And it's not being designed, nor was the basketball court designed for chasing balls and that sort of thing, which Cy Hampson and other parks will serve us well. So I think this is a great solution to the challenge we have in that area with dogs in the courts. Thank you.
Councillor Novak?
Thank you. As a dog owner, I for one really appreciate that this is finally coming to council. The only thing I would add is that I would hope that staff would consider making this off-leash dog area as large as possible, given the limited area available in Iroquois Park in that particular area. I think it's great. I know a number of people in that area who live in that area that would use that on a regular basis. So I'm very happy to see this come forward. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I'm not inclined to support the motion. I take a sort of a different view on this. First of all, when we looked at our parks needs analysis, shortage of green space for a growing community, and although it's been mentioned that nobody uses this space, I'm worried about giving up a nice chunk of green space that is left open for kids to do whatever they want to do, play frisbee or have a picnic, whatever, and to give that up in favor of dogs. I was a dog owner. I'm a dog grandma. I love dogs. But you know, some of the reasons that this came forward was because concern of, you know, droppings left on the tennis court, and concern about people, maybe older people, need a contained space because they're unable to chase after their dogs. And so I guess my experience with dogs, no matter how big they are, every owner should be able to control their dog, whether they're big or small, and in a set, you know, controlled area or outside. So that's a concern for me. What is also a concern is that, you know, these dog owners currently using the tennis court to walk their dog and allow their dog to do their business. If that's a sort of person they are, that they won't pick up after their dog on a tennis court, putting them in a dog area, I don't think is going to change their behavior. So that's, you know, those are concerns for me as well. I'm also worried that although that we're, you know, we're not going to call it a formal dog park, and it's going to be probably an area that's not large enough that people would expect. Concerned that, you know, once you build it, they will come, and then we'll end up with complaints about it's too small. Why didn't we plan better for this? So yeah, so a number of concerns about that, and I guess the main thing, I go back to my previous point about, you know, in our growing community, trying to attract more families and kids to the community. I'd rather keep that green space for families and kids. Thanks.
Anyone else? I'll provide a comment. I'd like to thank staff. This was the motion that I brought forward back in, I think it was April, so long ago. You found a nice solution to, I think, a problem, and it's more than just the feces component. It's the conflicts that have been arising on the courts between dog owners and court users. So trying to get them into their own separate areas is a good idea. I'm not worried about the loss of green space because there's a very large soccer field that is not always used, which is available for somebody to throw frisbees, footballs, baseballs, whatever. I mean, that's a very large space. This space, having been in that park multiple times when there's actually events on, is very rarely used. So I think it's a really good compromise on staff's part to provide this, and the community has been asking for it. We almost had one in a different park that didn't work out because of the migratory bird sanctuary, and this is an area where it's away from houses, and And, you know, it gives people opportunity. I think what's lost on the terms of throwing a ball and running is this is an opportunity for dogs to socialize. And it speaks to the previous item on the agenda, and that the more dogs socialize at a young age, at least less likely they are to be aggressive and become dangerous dogs. So I think it's, from that perspective, it's actually very valuable. Thank you. And so, anybody else anything to say? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? We have one opposed, Councillor O'Keefe. Motion carries. We don't have any other business, and so I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So
Councillor
moved.
Duck, and then
Second.
Mayor McNeil Smith second, and all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Well done.
Thank you, staff. Thank you for coming out and waiting.
Yeah.